The ballroom glittered with 1,000 candles, but Lady Eleanor Whitford stood frozen in the shadows, her heart shattering with every cruel word that drifted through the marble archway. She had just heard the man the entire aristocracy adored, Viscount Adrian Belmont, mock her body, her worth, her very existence, while his friends roared with laughter. In that moment, something inside her broke. And then, something far stronger was born. Stay with me until the end to see how this woman society threw away became the most powerful Duchess in England. If you're watching from London, New York, Tokyo, or anywhere else in the world, drop your city in the comments below, hit that like button, and let's begin this journey together. The December wind rattled the tall windows of Ashford House with such violence that Eleanor could feel the cold seeping through the glass, through the heavy velvet curtains, through the layers of silk and whalebone that encased her body like armor. She stood near the terrace doors, slightly removed from the swirling mass of dancers, watching the London aristocracy perform its elaborate rituals of courtship, competition, and calculated cruelty. At 24, Lady Eleanor Whitford occupied a peculiar position in society, visible enough to be noticed, invisible enough to be dismissed. She was the second daughter of Baron Whitford, a man of respectable title but dwindling fortune. Her elder sister, Cecilia, had married well 3 years prior, securing a match with an earl's heir and fulfilling the family's primary obligation. Eleanor, therefore, existed in a strange limbo, neither essential enough to command serious suitors nor forgettable enough to escape scrutiny. Her mind was her refuge and her curse. While other young women discussed the cut of a new gown or the scandal of an elopement, Eleanor devoured books on commerce, history, and natural philosophy. She could discuss Adam Smith's theories on trade with the same fluency she brought to Latin poetry. Her father's library had been her sanctuary since childhood, and its contents had shaped her into someone fundamentally incompatible with the shallow waters of aristocratic courtship. But intelligence without conventional beauty, society had taught her, was worthless in a woman. Eleanor understood the mathematics of her situation with painful clarity. Her figure was fuller than fashion demanded. Her features, while pleasant, lacked the delicate porcelain quality that poets praised. Her dowry was modest. Her conversation, while engaging to those who valued substance, was deemed too serious by potential suitors who wanted ornamental wives, not intellectual companions. She had learned to armor herself with careful indifference, to smile politely while men's eyes slid past her toward prettier prospects, to pretend she didn't notice the whispers and pitying glances. Most of the time, she succeeded. Tonight was different. Tonight, something felt wrong. The air itself seemed charged with malice, and Eleanor's instincts, honed by years of social surveillance, told her that she was the subject of attention, though not the kind any woman desired. The winter ball at Ashford House was the season's most prestigious event, hosted by the Duke and Duchess of Ashford in their magnificent Mayfair mansion. The ballroom blazed with crystal chandeliers, their light reflecting off polished marble floors and gilt-framed mirrors that multiplied the crowd into infinity. Women in jewel-toned silk swirled past like exotic birds, their fans fluttering, their laughter crystalline and calculated. Men in severe black evening wear moved through the crowd with predatory grace, their eyes assessing, judging, dismissing. Eleanor wore a gown of deep burgundy, chosen because the color flattered her complexion and because it was practical enough to wear again. The dress was well made but not extravagant. Her family couldn't afford extravagance. Her dark hair was styled simply, without the elaborate ringlets and jeweled combs that adorned other women. She wore her grandmother's pearls, her only valuable jewelry. She looked, she knew, perfectly acceptable and entirely forgettable, or so she had thought. "Lady Eleanor, how wonderful to see you." The voice belonged to Miss Georgiana Hartley, a young woman whose friendship Eleanor valued precisely because it seemed genuine. Georgiana navigated society's treacherous waters with grace and kindness, a rare combination. "Georgiana," Eleanor smiled, grateful for the company. "You look magnificent." "You're too kind. I feel rather like an overstuffed peacock in this monstrosity my mother insisted upon." Georgiana gestured ruefully at her elaborate green gown. "But never mind my fashion disasters. I've been searching for you. Have you been hiding near the terrace all evening?" "Not hiding," Eleanor said lightly, "merely observing. The crowd is particularly vicious tonight. Georgiana's expression clouded. Eleanor, I need to tell you something. There's been talk. There's always talk. This is different. Georgiana lowered her voice, glancing around nervously. It's Viscount Belmont. He's been saying things, cruel things, about you. The name sent an unexpected jolt through Eleanor's chest. Adrian Belmont, Viscount of Thornbury, was society's golden child. Handsome, charming, wealthy, and possessed of the kind of effortless charisma that made everyone want to please him. Eleanor had observed him from a distance, had even spoken with him twice at previous events. Both conversations had been surprisingly engaging. He had seemed genuinely interested in her opinions on a new parliamentary bill, had debated with her intelligently about trade policy. She had allowed herself, very briefly, to wonder if perhaps he was different from other men. If perhaps intelligence might matter more than appearance to someone of substance. What a fool she had been. What has he been saying? Eleanor's voice remained steady, but her hands clenched in the folds of her skirt. Georgiana looked miserable. Terrible things. About your appearance, your figure. He's been making jokes, Eleanor, cruel jokes, and people are laughing. The ballroom seemed to tilt slightly. Eleanor forced herself to breathe normally, to keep her expression calm. I see. Thank you for telling me. I wanted to warn you before you encountered him directly. He's holding court near the refreshment tables with Lord Ashworth and Mr. Pemberton. They've been drinking, and they're being absolutely horrible. Then I shall avoid the refreshment tables. Eleanor, I'm fine, Georgiana. Truly. I've endured worse than a drunken viscount's mockery. But even as she spoke the words, Eleanor knew they were a lie. This felt different. This felt personal in a way that casual dismissal never had. She had spoken with Adrian Belmont, had believed she glimpsed in him a mind that might value hers. To learn that he had been mocking her, joking about her with his friends, it cut deeper than she wanted to admit. Georgiana squeezed her hand. You're worth 1,000 of him. Anyone with sense can see that. Unfortunately, sense is in rather short supply among the aristocracy. Before Georgiana could respond, a commotion near the terrace doors drew their attention. A group of young men burst through the entrance, bringing a gust of cold air and loud laughter with them. They had clearly been smoking outside, and their faces were flushed with cold and alcohol. At their center was Adrian Belmont. He was, Eleanor had to admit, extraordinarily handsome. Tall and athletic, with golden hair, bright blue eyes, and features that seemed carved by an artist dedicated to masculine perfection. He wore his evening clothes with careless elegance, and his smile could light up a room. He was 26, heir to an earldom, and possessed of a fortune substantial enough to buy forgiveness for almost any transgression. Everyone adored him. Men wanted his friendship. Women wanted his attention. Mothers wanted him for their daughters. And he had been mocking her. I need some air, Eleanor said abruptly. Eleanor, don't! But Eleanor was already moving, slipping through the crowd toward a different exit, desperate to escape before her composure crumbled. She needed a moment alone, somewhere dark and quiet, where she could process this humiliation without an audience. The mansion was large enough to provide plenty of hiding places. Eleanor navigated through a side door into a smaller parlor, then down a corridor away from the main gathering. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Her hands trembled. She found refuge in a small library, tucked away on the second floor. The fire had burned low, leaving the room in shadows, but Eleanor didn't light additional candles. She simply sank into a chair near the dying embers and let herself feel the full weight of the evening's revelation. She had been a fool. Again. How many times would she make this mistake? How many times would she allow herself to hope that someone might see past her appearance to the person underneath? How many times would she endure the crushing disappointment of learning that even the men who seemed intelligent, who seemed different, ultimately judged her by the same shallow standards as everyone else? Voices in the hallway jerked her from her thoughts. Absolutely hilarious, Adrian. You should have seen Ashworth's face. Eleanor froze. The voices were approaching, growing louder. Multiple men, their speech slightly slurred, their laughter raucous. Gentlemen, please. We're being terribly rude to our hosts. Oh, nonsense. Everyone's too drunk to notice we've gone exploring. The library door swung open. Eleanor shrank back into her chair, hoping the shadows would conceal her. The fire was low enough that the far corners of the room remained dark. If she stayed perfectly still, perhaps they wouldn't notice her. 3 men entered: Adrian Belmont, Lord Ashworth, and Mr. Pemberton. They were, as Georgiana had warned, clearly drunk. Ashworth carried a bottle of what appeared to be expensive brandy, and Pemberton was laughing at something Adrian had said. Told her mother that the dress did nothing for her figure, and the poor woman looked ready to faint. They sprawled into chairs near the fireplace, their backs to Eleanor's hiding spot. She barely breathed, praying they would leave quickly. "Speaking of unfortunate figures," Ashworth said, his voice thick with malice, "did you see Lady Eleanor Whitford tonight? That gown does her no favors." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. "Ashworth, you're terrible," Adrian said, but he was laughing. "No, truly, Adrian, you've been stringing the poor creature along for weeks now. Surely you're not actually interested." "Interested?" Adrian laughed harder. "In Lady Eleanor? Good heavens, no." The words struck like physical blows. Eleanor's fingernails dug into the arms of her chair, her whole body rigid with shock and pain. "Then why waste your time talking to her at every event?" Pemberton asked. "You're giving the woman ideas." "Because she's actually quite intelligent," Adrian replied. "And I enjoy a good debate. She knows more about trade policy than half the men in Parliament. It's entertaining to test my arguments against someone with a functioning mind." "So she's useful for conversation," Ashworth said dryly. "Nothing more?" "Of course nothing more." "Be serious, Ashworth. Can you honestly imagine me courting someone who looks like that? I have standards. A man in my position must marry someone who enhances his reputation, not someone the entire ton mocks behind her back." Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Each word carved itself into her heart with surgical precision. "You're cruel, Belmont," Pemberton said, but he was grinning. "The woman probably thinks you're half in love with her." "Then she's even more foolish than I thought," Adrian replied. "Look, I'll admit she has a fine mind. If she were a man, I'd probably enjoy her friendship. But a wife? I need beauty, grace, social polish. I need someone who looks magnificent on my arm, someone other men envy me for possessing. Lady Eleanor is pleasant enough in private conversation, but utterly unsuitable for anything more." "Pleasant enough," Ashworth repeated, laughing. Such glowing praise. "I'm being honest. She's educated, well-read, capable of intelligent discussion. Those are admirable qualities in a woman, useful qualities even. But they don't compensate for a lack of physical appeal. When I marry, it will be to someone like Lady Victoria Hastings, beautiful, elegant, from an excellent family, someone who knows how to be an ornament without trying to be an intellectual." "God forbid your wife have opinions," Pemberton said mockingly. "Exactly," Adrian agreed, and they all laughed. The conversation continued, but Eleanor heard nothing else. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. The room seemed to contract around her, squeezing the air from her lungs. Useful for conversation. Utterly unsuitable for anything more. Lacks physical appeal. Foolish enough to think he might be interested. The words repeated in her mind like a nightmare refrain, each repetition driving the humiliation deeper. She had been nothing more than an entertaining diversion to him, a curiosity, a way to pass time at boring social events. He had never seen her as a woman, as a potential partner, only as an intelligent pet, something mildly interesting but fundamentally beneath consideration, and he had been laughing about it with his friends. The 3 men eventually rose, still chuckling, and left the library in search of more alcohol. The door swung shut behind them. Eleanor sat motionless in the darkness for a long time. Then, slowly, carefully, she stood. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to support her weight. She walked to the small mirror hanging near the door and looked at herself in the dim light. She saw what Adrian Belmont saw, what all of them saw. A woman too tall, too substantial, too present. A figure that refused to conform to delicate ideals. Features pleasant but unremarkable. Nothing special. Nothing desirable. Useful for conversation. Something inside Eleanor crystallized in that moment. The pain remained. It would remain for a long time. But alongside it grew something harder, colder, stronger. She would never again diminish herself for a man's approval. She would never again hope that intelligence might compensate for failing to meet some arbitrary standard of beauty. She would never again shrink, apologize, or pretend to be less than she was in the desperate hope that someone might find her acceptable. If society could not see her value, if men like Adrian Belmont could only appreciate her mind while mocking her body, then society and men like Adrian Belmont could go to hell. Eleanor straightened her spine, smoothed her dress, and left the library. She navigated the mansion's corridors with new purpose, no longer hiding but simply moving through space with quiet dignity. When she returned to the ballroom, she didn't seek out the shadows. She stood tall, shoulders back, chin high. Let them stare. Let them whisper. She was done shrinking. Georgiana found her near the stairs. "Eleanor? I've been looking everywhere for you. Are you all right?" "I'm perfectly well," Eleanor said. And the strange thing was, it was partly true. The pain was immense, yes. The humiliation burned, but underneath it all was a foundation of cold, hard resolve. "You look different," Georgiana said uncertainly. "Did something happen?" "Yes," Eleanor said quietly. "Something happened. I finally saw myself clearly." "I don't understand." Eleanor smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "I've been playing a game I can never win, Georgiana, trying to earn respect and affection from people who have already decided I'm not worth either. It's a fool's errand, and I'm done with it. Eleanor, I'm going home. Please give my regards to our hosts." "Let me come with you." "No, stay. Enjoy yourself. I simply need—" Eleanor paused, searching for words. "I need to think." She left before Georgiana could protest further. The Whitford carriage was summoned, and Eleanor endured the short ride home in silence. Her lady's maid helped her undress, asking no questions about the early return, and Eleanor was grateful for the discretion. Alone in her bedroom, she finally allowed the tears to come. She wept for her foolishness, for her naive hope that someone might value her for more than her appearance. She wept for the girl she had been that morning, still believing, still hoping, still trying to fit into a world that would never accept her. She wept for every cruel word she had endured, every dismissive glance, every moment of being overlooked and underestimated. But even as she cried, the resolve inside her hardened into something unbreakable. When dawn broke over London, Eleanor sat at her desk and wrote in her journal, "I will not apologize for existing. I will not diminish myself to ease other people's discomfort. I will not beg for scraps of affection from men who see me as useful but undesirable. If the world cannot accept me as I am, then I will build a life beyond its reach. I will find purpose, independence, and dignity outside the narrow confines of aristocratic approval. Whatever that requires, whatever sacrifices that demands, I will do it. Starting today, I choose myself." She signed it, dated it, and closed the journal. Lady Eleanor Whitford, the woman society mocked, was done asking for permission to exist. What she didn't know, as she watched the sun rise over London's rooftops, was that her transformation had already been observed. That in the shadows of the previous night's ball, another set of eyes had been watching, and that a man with very different values was about to offer her an escape she could never have anticipated. But that morning, Eleanor knew only one truth. She would never again shrink herself to earn anyone's approval. The woman everyone mocked had just decided to stop caring what they thought, and that decision would change everything. The letter arrived 3 weeks later, delivered by a footman in unfamiliar livery, black and silver, austere and military in its precision. Eleanor was in her father's library when the servant appeared, announced by their aging butler with an expression of barely concealed curiosity. She had spent most of the previous weeks in that room, avoiding social engagements, declining invitations, and burying herself in books about commerce, estate management, and legal structures. If she was going to build a life outside society's approval, she needed knowledge. She needed skills that had nothing to do with needlepoint or watercolors. "A letter for Lady Eleanor Whitford," the footman said, his voice clipped and professional. "From His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorne." Eleanor's hand froze halfway to the teacup she'd been reaching for. The Duke of Blackthorne. She knew the name, of course. Everyone did. Rowan Blackthorne had inherited his title at 18 when his father died in a hunting accident. At 20, he'd purchased a commission and distinguished himself in the Peninsular War with such brutal efficiency that veterans still spoke of him in hushed, half-fearful tones. He'd returned to England 5 years ago, at 28, and promptly disappeared to his northern estates, emerging only for essential parliamentary sessions and rare business dealings. He was wealthy, powerful, and utterly uninterested in London society. He was also, if rumors were true, a widower with a young son. "Thank you," Eleanor said, accepting the heavy envelope. The footman bowed and departed, leaving her alone with the mysterious correspondence. The paper was expensive, the seal pressed deep into black wax. Eleanor broke it carefully and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was bold, masculine, and surprisingly elegant. "Lady Eleanor Whitford, I am writing to request a private meeting to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. I will be in London for 2 days only, arriving tomorrow evening. If you are amenable, I will call upon you at 10 o'clock the following morning. I understand this is highly irregular. I assure you the matter is both serious and entirely respectable. Your father's presence during our conversation is, of course, expected and welcome. Respectfully, Rowan Blackthorne, Duke of Blackthorne." Eleanor read it 3 times, searching for hidden meaning or explanation. She found neither. Just a direct, almost businesslike request for a meeting about an unspecified matter of mutual benefit. Her father, when she showed him the letter, looked equally baffled. "Blackthorne," Baron Whitford murmured, studying the signature. "I've never met the man. Heard of him, certainly. War hero, shipping magnate, keeps to himself up north. What could he possibly want with you?" "I have no idea," Eleanor admitted, "but I'm curious enough to find out." Her father's expression softened with concern. "Eleanor, my dear, you've been so withdrawn since the Ashford ball. If this is some elaborate prank, some cruel joke, then I'll handle it," Eleanor said firmly. The old Eleanor would have shied away from potential humiliation. The new Eleanor, the one forged in that dark library 3 weeks ago, no longer cared enough to be afraid. "Send word that we'll receive him tomorrow morning." The next day crawled past with agonizing slowness. Eleanor refused to speculate, refused to hope for anything. She simply dressed carefully in a day gown of deep blue, arranged her hair in a simple style, and waited in the drawing room with her father when the clock struck 10. The Duke of Blackthorne arrived precisely on time. He was not what Eleanor expected. She had imagined a war hero would be scarred, weathered, perhaps damaged by violence. Instead, the man who entered their drawing room moved with the controlled grace of a predator, every gesture economical and purposeful. He was tall, taller than Adrian Belmont, broader through the shoulders, built like someone who worked rather than merely exercised. His face was harsh rather than handsome, all sharp angles and hard lines, with dark hair silvered at the temples despite his being only 33. His eyes were gray, cold as winter seas, and they assessed the room with the same calculating precision a general might use to survey a battlefield. He wore black, as seemed to be his preference, and carried himself with an authority that made Eleanor's father seem diminished by comparison. "Baron Whitford," he said, his voice deep and rough-edged. "Lady Eleanor, thank you for receiving me." "Your Grace," Baron Whitford said, recovering his composure. "Please, sit. This is most unexpected." "I imagine so." Blackthorne settled into a chair with the same controlled precision he brought to all his movements. "I'll be direct, as I have little patience for social niceties. I've come to propose a marriage." The words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Eleanor's father made a strangled sound. Eleanor herself simply stared, too shocked to speak. "I beg your pardon?" Baron Whitford managed. "A marriage," Blackthorne repeated calmly. "Between myself and your daughter. I understand this is unusual." "Unusual?" The Baron's voice rose. "Your Grace, you've never met my daughter. You've shown no interest in remarrying, and you arrive unannounced with a marriage proposal. This is beyond unusual. This is—" "Practical," Blackthorne interrupted. His gray eyes shifted to Eleanor. "Lady Eleanor, I would hear your thoughts. Not your father's outrage, not society's expectations. Yours." Eleanor found her voice. "Why me?" "Because you possess qualities I require. and I can offer you something few men in London would: genuine independence and respect. You know nothing about me. I know more than you think." Blackthorne's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those cold eyes. "I was at the Ashford ball 3 weeks ago. I observed you throughout the evening. I witnessed you overhear Viscount Belmont's conversation in the library." Eleanor's blood turned cold. "You were there?" "In the shadows. I had stepped away from the ballroom's tedium, seeking somewhere quiet to review some documents. I watched you enter, saw you take refuge in the dark corner. I was about to announce my presence when Belmont and his companions arrived." He paused. "I heard what they said. I saw your face when you heard it." The humiliation washed over Eleanor again, fresh and burning. "So you know I'm the woman society mocks, that I'm useful for conversation but utterly unsuitable for anything more. And you've come here to— what? Offer pity?" "No." The word was flat, absolute. "I've come to offer a partnership." "I don't understand." Blackthorne leaned forward slightly. "Lady Eleanor, I need a wife. Not for romance, not for social advancement, not for any of the ridiculous reasons London marriages are contracted. I need someone intelligent, capable, and strong enough to manage my northern estate while I handle my business interests and parliamentary obligations. Someone who won't wilt under pressure or require constant attention and flattery. Someone who can run a household, oversee staff, make difficult decisions, and endure a harsh climate and social isolation without complaint. And you think I'm that person? I observed you at multiple social events over the past season. You demonstrate remarkable composure under social pressure. You engage intelligently on subjects most women are discouraged from studying. You show kindness to those beneath your social station. I watched you spend 20 minutes conversing with a nervous young debutante at the Morrison reception when everyone else ignored her. You possess exactly the qualities I require." Eleanor's father had gone very still. "Your Grace, what exactly are you proposing?" "A marriage of practical alliance." Blackthorne's tone remained businesslike. "I offer Lady Eleanor the title of Duchess, complete authority over the management of Ironcrest Fortress and its surrounding lands, financial security, and freedom from London's social judgment. In return, she will run my household, host necessary political gatherings, and serve as a stable maternal presence for my son." "Your son," Eleanor said quietly. "Lucas. He's 7 years old." Blackthorne's expression hardened slightly. "You know of him. Society speaks of him. They say he's difficult." "Society," Blackthorne said with icy contempt, "says many things. Most of them ignorant nonsense. Lucas is intelligent, sensitive, and has been traumatized by circumstances beyond his control. He requires patience and understanding, qualities his late mother possessed, and which are in short supply among the shallow creatures who populate London ballrooms." There was pain beneath the coldness, Eleanor realized. Carefully hidden, rigidly controlled, but present nonetheless. "What happened to your wife?" she asked. "She died in childbirth 4 years ago, delivering our second child. The baby died as well." Blackthorne's voice remained level, but his hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the arms of his chair. "Lucas witnessed more than any child should. He's been withdrawn since then. The staff at Ironcrest fears him because he has nightmares and sometimes lashes out in confusion. London governesses quit within weeks, claiming he's unmanageable. He's not. He's grieving and isolated and surrounded by people who lack the courage to show him compassion." Eleanor's heart contracted. "And you think I would show him compassion? I think you understand what it means to be judged unfairly, to be dismissed and underestimated, to have your worth determined by shallow criteria rather than actual character." Blackthorne met her gaze directly. "I think you possess the strength to endure a harsh climate, an isolated fortress, and a wounded child who desperately needs someone to see past his fear to the boy underneath." The room fell silent. Baron Whitford looked between them, clearly struggling to process this bizarre proposal. "Your Grace, this is highly irregular. My daughter deserves courtship, romance." "Does she?" Blackthorne's tone was polite but cutting. Forgive me, Baron, but London has offered your daughter neither courtship nor romance. What it has offered is mockery, dismissal, and social isolation. I'm offering her authority, purpose, and respect. Which serves her better? That's for Eleanor to decide, the Baron said stiffly. Both men turned to her. Eleanor sat very still, her mind racing through possibilities and implications. This was insane. Marrying a stranger, moving to some isolated northern fortress, becoming stepmother to a traumatized child. It defied every conventional expectation of courtship and marriage. And yet, what did she have in London? A father who loved her but couldn't protect her from society's cruelty. A sister married and distant. A social landscape that would never accept her. Adrian Belmont and men like him, who valued her mind but mocked her body. Who saw her as useful but unsuitable. What did Blackthorne offer? Escape. Purpose. Authority. A child who needed her. A life far from the whispers and pitying glances. No romance, true, no love, but also no pretense, no false promises, no inevitable disappointment. I have questions, she said finally. Blackthorne nodded. Of course. This marriage would be in name only? No. His directness was almost shocking. I require an heir, eventually, but I have no interest in forcing intimacy or creating additional discomfort. That aspect of marriage would be approached with mutual consent and respect for your autonomy. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks, but appreciated his honesty. What authority would I actually have? Complete authority over household management, staff supervision, and estate operations when I'm absent, which is frequently. You would control your own finances through a generous allowance. You would make decisions about Lucas's education and care. You would represent the Blackthorne interests at necessary social functions. He paused. I'm offering you real power, Lady Eleanor, not the decorative role most wives occupy. And if I fail, if I can't manage the estate or connect with your son, then we adjust. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting honest effort and intelligent decision-making. Something almost like warmth entered his expression. I've built a shipping empire and managed military campaigns. I understand that worthwhile endeavors require patience and adaptation. Why not court someone from the northern families, someone already familiar with that climate and society? Because I've observed northern society and found it as shallow as London's, simply with different prejudices. And because, he hesitated, choosing words carefully, because I watched you that night in the library. I saw you hear Belmont's mockery, saw the pain in your face, and then I watched you stand, straighten your spine, and walk back into that ballroom with your head high. That's the strength I need. That's the character Lucas needs. Eleanor's throat tightened. You're offering me this because you witnessed my humiliation? I'm offering you this because you transformed humiliation into resolve. That's rare. That's valuable. Blackthorne's expression remained serious. I won't lie to you, Lady Eleanor. Ironcrest is harsh. The climate is brutal, wind and cold that penetrate stone. The fortress sits on cliffs overlooking the North Sea. The isolation is profound. The social environment is limited. Lucas is genuinely difficult, traumatized and fearful, and prone to fits of panic. The staff is loyal but set in their ways. You would be walking into hardship. But you would also be walking into freedom. No one at Ironcrest cares about London's standards of beauty or propriety. No one will mock your intelligence or dismiss your capabilities. You will be the Duchess. You will have authority, purpose, and respect. He leaned forward. And you will have the satisfaction of proving everyone who underestimated you absolutely wrong. The words resonated through Eleanor like a bell, proving them wrong, building something meaningful instead of begging for scraps of approval, using her mind and strength for actual purpose instead of pretending to be decorative. It was insane. It was also the only real offer of respect she'd received in years. I need time to consider this, she said. I leave London tomorrow evening. I need an answer by noon tomorrow. That's less than a day. Yes. Blackthorne's expression didn't change. I don't make decisions slowly, and I don't have time for extended courtship. This is a practical arrangement, Lady Eleanor. Either it appeals to you or it doesn't. Either you're strong enough to accept the challenge, or you're not. It was, Eleanor realized, a test, not a cruel one, but a genuine assessment of her character. She stood. Blackthorne rose immediately, a courtesy she noticed and appreciated. "I'll send word to your hotel by noon tomorrow," she said. "That's all I ask." He bowed formally. "Baron Whitford, Lady Eleanor, thank you for your time." After he left, Eleanor and her father sat in stunned silence. "Eleanor," the Baron said finally, "you cannot seriously be considering this." "Why not?" "Because it's madness. Marrying a stranger, moving to some frozen fortress, caring for a traumatized child, as opposed to remaining in London, where I'm mocked and dismissed and utterly without prospects." Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Father, be honest. What future do I have here?" Her father's face crumpled slightly. "You deserve better than a loveless marriage of convenience." "Do I? Because London seems quite certain I deserve nothing at all." Eleanor softened her tone. "Father, I love you, but you can't protect me from society's judgment, and I can't spend my life hiding in libraries hoping someone will eventually see past my appearance. Blackthorne is offering me something real, authority, purpose, respect. But no love. Most aristocratic marriages have no love. At least this one is honest about it." Eleanor moved to the window, looking out at the gray London street. "He saw me at my lowest moment. He watched me hear Belmont's mockery. And instead of pitying me, he saw strength. That matters, Father. Someone finally saw something in me worth valuing." "Eleanor, I'm going to accept," she said quietly. "I know it's impulsive. I know it's risky. But staying here, enduring more seasons of mockery and dismissal, that's not living. That's slow suffocation." Her father was silent for a long moment. Then, "If you truly want this, I won't stand in your way. But please, please be careful. Blackthorne seems honorable, but he's essentially a stranger." "I know." Eleanor turned from the window. "But right now, a stranger who respects me is better than a society that never will." That night, Eleanor barely slept. She reviewed every aspect of Blackthorne's proposal, examining it from every angle, searching for hidden traps or unstated expectations. She found none. What she found was exactly what he'd described, a practical arrangement between two people who needed what the other could provide. He needed a capable manager and a maternal presence for his son. She needed escape and purpose. It should have felt cold, mercenary even. Instead, it felt like the first honest offer she'd received in her entire adult life. At dawn, she wrote her acceptance and sealed it. At 11 o'clock, she sent it to Blackthorne's hotel. At 3 o'clock, his response arrived. "Arrangements will be made. The wedding will take place in 1 month, allowing time for preparation. Thank you for your courage. I will not fail you. R.B." The wedding took place on a cold February morning in a small London church, attended by Eleanor's immediate family, her friend Georgiana, and a handful of witnesses. Blackthorne arrived alone, dressed in black, his expression serious and controlled. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. Eleanor spoke her vows clearly, accepting this strange new reality. When Blackthorne placed the ring on her finger, his hands were warm and steady. "You're certain?" he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "Yes," Eleanor replied, and meant it. The wedding breakfast was equally subdued. Eleanor's sister Cecilia had attended, her expression a mixture of shock and poorly concealed envy. Eleanor was now a duchess, outranking her sister's earl's heir husband. Her mother wept delicately into a handkerchief. Her father looked worried but resigned. Georgiana pulled Eleanor aside as the gathering concluded. "Are you truly all right?" she asked, gripping Eleanor's hands. "I think so," Eleanor said honestly. "I'm terrified, but also hopeful. For the first time in years, I'm hopeful." "Write to me. Please. I need to know you're safe." "I will. I promise." They departed London that evening, traveling north in Blackthorne's well-appointed carriage. The Duke spent most of the journey reviewing business documents, occasionally glancing up to explain aspects of his shipping enterprise or Ironcrest's operations. Eleanor appreciated the information but found herself more interested in studying him. Her husband. This hard, controlled man who had witnessed her humiliation and somehow seen strength instead of weakness. You're staring, he said without looking up from his papers. I'm trying to understand you. There's not much to understand. I'm a practical man with specific needs and limited patience for social pretense. Why did you really choose me? Eleanor asked. The truth this time. Blackthorne set down his papers and met her gaze directly. Because I watched you refuse to break. Because I saw you choose dignity over despair. Because in a ballroom full of shallow, decorative creatures, you were the only person with actual steel in your spine. He paused. I need steel, Eleanor. Ironcrest needs steel. Lucas needs steel. The pretty fragile women London produces would shatter in a week up north. And you think I won't shatter? I know you won't. His certainty was absolute. You've already survived worse than weather and isolation. They traveled for 3 days, the landscape growing progressively wilder and more desolate as they moved north. The roads became rougher, the towns smaller and farther apart. The sky turned gray and stayed that way. On the 4th morning, Eleanor woke to the sound of waves. We're nearly there, Blackthorne said, looking out the carriage window. Ironcrest is just beyond that ridge. Eleanor leaned forward to look. The fortress emerged from the mist like something from a ghost story. Dark stone walls rising from sheer cliffs, turrets black against the gray sky, waves crashing against the rocks below with brutal force. It was massive, medieval, and absolutely unforgiving. Welcome home, Your Grace, Blackthorne said quietly. Eleanor stared at the fortress that would be her new life. No turning back now. The carriage rolled through the main gates, and Eleanor's new life began. The servants lined up in the courtyard looked like they were preparing for an execution rather than greeting their new Duchess. Eleanor counted 14 staff members, all dressed in the same austere black and gray that seemed to be Ironcrest's official palette. Their faces ranged from openly hostile to carefully blank, and not one of them met her eyes as she descended from the carriage. The wind howled across the courtyard with such force that Eleanor had to grip her cloak to keep it from tearing away. Your Grace, said a severe-looking woman who stepped forward with the rigid posture of a military commander. She was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin. I am Mrs. Rothwell, the head housekeeper. Welcome to Ironcrest. The words were correct, but the tone carried all the warmth of the North Sea crashing against the cliffs below. Thank you, Mrs. Rothwell, Eleanor said, keeping her voice steady despite the wind trying to steal it. The staff will show you to your chambers. His Grace typically dines at 7. Lucas takes his meals in the nursery. Mrs. Rothwell's expression suggested this arrangement was non-negotiable. We maintain strict schedules at Ironcrest. The fortress runs efficiently because we do not deviate from established routines. Eleanor glanced at Rowan, but he had already disappeared through a side door with a man carrying documents. Apparently business would not wait even for his new wife's arrival. I see, Eleanor said. I look forward to learning those routines. Indeed. Mrs. Rothwell's tone made it clear she doubted Eleanor's ability to do so. This way, Your Grace. The interior of Ironcrest matched its exterior, all stone and shadows, with narrow windows that let in precious little light. The corridors were maze-like, twisting through the ancient structure with no apparent logic. Eleanor tried to memorize the route, but gave up after the 5th turn. Everything looked the same, gray stone, dark wood, and an oppressive sense of cold that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Her chambers were in the East Tower, Mrs. Rothwell explained. The Duchess's traditional rooms. They had not been occupied since the previous Duchess's death 4 years ago. The rooms were beautiful in a stark, intimidating way. High ceilings, heavy furniture, tapestries depicting hunting scenes and battles. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the bedroom, and a sitting room overlooked the cliffs and sea. Everything was immaculately clean but utterly impersonal, like a museum display rather than a home. Your lady's maid will arrive shortly to help you dress for dinner, Mrs. Rothwell said. If you require anything, ring for a servant. Do not wander the fortress alone until you learn the layout. The cliff paths are dangerous and we've had incidents. What kind of incidents? The kind that happen when people don't follow instructions. Mrs. Rothwell's expression remained rigid. Dinner is at 7. Do not be late. She left before Eleanor could respond. Eleanor stood in the center of her new sitting room, listening to the wind howl and the waves crash, and wondered if she had made a catastrophic mistake. The lady's maid, who appeared an hour later, was young, perhaps 18, and looked terrified. "Your Grace," she whispered, curtsying so deeply she nearly toppled. "I'm Annie. I'm to help you dress." "Thank you, Annie. Please stand up. You'll hurt yourself curtsying like that." The girl straightened but kept her eyes fixed on the floor. "Sorry, Your Grace. I've never served a duchess before. Mrs. Rothwell said I'm not to make mistakes." "What happens if you make mistakes?" "She dismisses you, immediately, no references." Annie's hands trembled as she opened Eleanor's trunk. "Please, Your Grace, if I do anything wrong, tell me before Mrs. Rothwell finds out." Eleanor studied the frightened girl and made her first decision as Duchess of Blackthorne. "Annie, look at me." The girl's eyes lifted reluctantly. "I'm not interested in creating fear," Eleanor said firmly. "I'm interested in efficiency and respect. If you make an honest mistake, I'll tell you how to correct it. If Mrs. Rothwell objects, she can discuss it with me directly. Understood?" Annie's expression transformed from terror to something approaching hope. "Yes, Your Grace." "Thank you, Your Grace." "Good. Now, help me choose something appropriate for dinner with a duke who apparently values practicality over decoration." They selected a simple but elegant gown in deep green. Annie's hands stopped shaking as she worked, and by the time Eleanor was dressed, the girl was actually speaking in complete sentences. "The staff is worried, Your Grace," Annie said quietly as she arranged Eleanor's hair, "about you being here. They think you won't last a month." "Why?" "Because of the isolation and the cold and—" Annie hesitated. "And Lucas." Eleanor met the girl's eyes in the mirror. "Tell me about Lucas. The truth, not the rumors." "He's not a bad boy, Your Grace. He's just broken. After his mother died, after he saw—" Annie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They say he watched her bleed to death, that he screamed for hours, that the new baby died in his arms. He was only 3. What 3-year-old could survive that?" Eleanor's chest tightened. "Where is he now?" "In the North Tower. He has rooms there. Mrs. Rothwell keeps him isolated, says it's for everyone's safety. He has terrible nightmares, Your Grace. Sometimes he screams so loudly the whole fortress hears it. Sometimes he lashes out at anyone who comes near him. The governesses never stay. They say he's possessed, that there's something wrong with him." "There's nothing wrong with him," Eleanor said sharply. "He's traumatized. He's a child who witnessed horror and has been abandoned by everyone who should be helping him." Annie stared at her. "You're going to try to help him, aren't you?" "Yes." "Mrs. Rothwell won't like that. She says Lucas is best left alone." "Then Mrs. Rothwell and I will have our first disagreement." Eleanor stood, straightening her gown. "Thank you, Annie. You did beautifully." The girl's smile was the first genuine warmth Eleanor had encountered since arriving. Dinner was served in a vast dining hall that could have seated 50 but held only 2. Rowan sat at the head of the table, still in his dark traveling clothes, reviewing documents even as servants brought course after course of surprisingly excellent food. Eleanor took her seat and waited for him to acknowledge her presence. He finished reading a page, set it aside, and finally looked up. "The journey wasn't too difficult." "The journey was fine. The arrival was less welcoming." "Mrs. Rothwell?" "Among others, the staff seems convinced I'll flee within a month." Something that might have been amusement flickered in Rowan's gray eyes. "I wouldn't blame you if you did. Ironcrest takes adjustment." "I don't run," Eleanor said. "You should know that about me by now." "Good." He resumed eating. "I'll be leaving for Liverpool tomorrow morning. Trade negotiations. I'll be gone approximately 3 weeks." Eleanor set down her fork. "You're leaving? Already? I've been here less than 4 hours." "Business doesn't wait for convenience." Rowan's tone was matter-of-fact. "Mrs. Rothwell will help you learn the household routines. The steward, Morrison, handles estate finances and can answer questions about the tenants and land management. You'll have full authority in my absence." "What about Lucas?" Rowan's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "What about him?" "I'd like to meet him. Annie says he's isolated in the North Tower." "That's for his own safety and the staff's peace of mind." "It's cruel." The word hung in the air between them like a thrown gauntlet. Rowan's eyes narrowed. You've been here 4 hours, and you're already questioning my parenting decisions. I'm questioning the decision to isolate a traumatized 7-year-old boy instead of getting him help. Eleanor kept her voice level but firm. You told me I would have authority over his care. Was that a lie? It was not a lie. Then I'm exercising that authority. I want to meet him tonight. He'll be asleep. Tomorrow morning, then, before you leave. Rowan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, He's difficult, Eleanor. Genuinely difficult. He has violent nightmares. He sometimes can't distinguish between past and present. He's bitten servants, destroyed property, screamed himself hoarse. The isolation isn't punishment, it's protection, for him and everyone else. Protection isn't the same as healing. And you think you can heal him? There was no mockery in the question, only exhaustion. 3 governesses have tried, all of them left within weeks. What makes you think you'll be different? Because I'm not a hired governess who can quit when things get difficult. I'm his stepmother. I'm not going anywhere. Eleanor leaned forward. And because I understand what it's like to be dismissed and feared for things beyond your control, I won't abandon him. Something in Rowan's expression shifted, not softening exactly, but recalibrating. 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll take you to him before I leave. But don't expect miracles, Eleanor. Some things are too broken to fix. Nothing is too broken to deserve compassion, Eleanor said quietly. Rowan had no response to that. After dinner, Eleanor returned to her chambers and lay awake listening to the fortress settle around her. The wind howled like something alive and hungry. The waves crashed with hypnotic violence. Somewhere in the distance, she heard what might have been a scream, high and terrified and abruptly cut off. Lucas. She rose and moved to the window, staring out at the black sea and blacker sky. What had she gotten herself into? This wasn't just a harsh climate or social isolation. This was a fortress full of frightened, resentful servants, a husband who treated her like a business arrangement, and a traumatized child everyone had given up on. But giving up wasn't in Eleanor's nature. Not anymore. At 7 the next morning, Rowan arrived at her chambers dressed for travel. Ready? He asked. Yes. They walked through the maze of corridors to the North Tower. With each step, Eleanor noticed the temperature dropping and the lighting dimming. The servants had clearly abandoned this section of the fortress. Dust gathered in corners, and the air smelled stale and neglected. This is unconscionable, Eleanor said. He's living in squalor. He destroys anything nice we give him. There's no point in wasting resources. They reached a heavy wooden door. Rowan produced a key. It's locked? Eleanor's voice rose. You lock him in. Only at night, for his safety. He sleepwalks. Last time he wasn't locked in, we found him on the cliff edge in his nightshirt, completely unaware of the danger. Rowan unlocked the door and pushed it open. The room beyond was sparse and cold. A narrow bed, a small table, a chest of drawers. The window was barred. Whether to keep Lucas in or keep danger out, Eleanor couldn't tell. In the corner, a small figure sat hunched against the wall, wrapped in a blanket. Lucas, Rowan said, his voice gentling slightly, I've brought someone to meet you. The boy didn't move or respond. Eleanor stepped forward slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. As she drew closer, she could see him more clearly. He was small for 7, with dark hair like his father's and eyes that seemed too large for his thin face. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his hands gripped the blanket with white-knuckled intensity. Hello, Lucas, Eleanor said softly. My name is Eleanor. I'm your father's new wife. No response. I know you don't know me. I know you've had people come and go before, but I want you to understand something important. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not a governess who will leave when things get difficult. I'm your stepmother, and I'm staying. Lucas's eyes finally lifted, meeting hers. They were gray like his father's, but filled with something beyond fear, a vast, echoing emptiness that made Eleanor's heart break. People always leave, he whispered. His voice was rough, as if from screaming or disuse. Mama left. The baby left. Everyone leaves. I won't. You will. It was stated as simple fact. They all do. Eleanor knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level despite Rowan's sharp intake of breath behind her. She was close enough now to see the dark circles under Lucas's eyes, the way his hands trembled, the old bruises on his arms from where he'd harmed himself during nightmares. "What if I promised?" Eleanor asked gently. "What if I gave you my word that no matter what happens, I will not abandon you? Promises don't mean anything. Mine do." Eleanor extended her hand slowly, palm up, non-threatening. "I'm going to prove that to you, Lucas. Day after day, I'm going to be here. I'm going to show you that some people keep their word." Lucas stared at her hand but didn't take it. "That's all right," Eleanor said. "You don't have to trust me yet. Trust is earned, but I'm going to earn it." "We need to go," Rowan said from the doorway, his voice tight. "The carriage is waiting." Eleanor stood slowly. "I'll come see you again tomorrow, Lucas, and the day after that, and the day after that." "You'll get bored," Lucas said, "or scared. Everyone does." "I don't bore easily, and I'm not easily frightened." Eleanor smiled. "Tomorrow I'll bring some books. Do you like stories?" For the first time, something flickered in those empty eyes. "Sometimes." "Good. I know some excellent ones." Outside the room, Rowan locked the door again. "That went better than I expected," he said. The bar was clearly very low. Eleanor turned to face him. "He's not staying in that room anymore. It's a cell, not a bedroom, and he's not being locked in at night like a prisoner." "Eleanor, no. You gave me authority over his care. I'm exercising it. We're moving him to rooms near mine where I can hear if he has nightmares. We're getting him proper furniture, proper clothes, proper food, and we're treating him like a child who needs help, not a monster who needs containment." Rowan's jaw tightened. "If he hurts you, he won't. You don't know that. Neither do you, but I'm willing to take that risk. Are you willing to let me try?" The silence stretched between them. Finally, Rowan said, "You have 3 weeks while I'm in Liverpool. If this doesn't work, if Lucas's condition worsens, or if you can't handle him, we return to the previous arrangements. Agreed?" "Agreed." Rowan studied her face for a long moment. "You're either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish." "Perhaps both." Something that might have been respect crossed his features. 3 weeks, Eleanor. Prove me wrong." He left within the hour, his carriage disappearing into the gray morning mist. Eleanor stood in the courtyard and watched him go, then turned back to the fortress that was now entirely her responsibility. Mrs. Rothwell appeared at her elbow like a manifestation of disapproval. "His Grace has departed, Your Grace. Shall I show you the household accounts?" "No," Eleanor said. "First I want Lucas moved to the blue rooms on the second floor of the East Wing. Immediately." Mrs. Rothwell's face went rigid. "That's impossible, Your Grace. Those rooms are for family members and honored guests, not for my stepson," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "Who is a member of this family and will be treated as such?" "Your Grace, you don't understand. Lucas is dangerous. He cannot be trusted in the main residence. The last time we tried, he nearly set fire to the library during one of his episodes. Then we'll take precautions. But he will not spend another night in that tower cell. His Grace will not approve. His Grace gave me full authority over Lucas's care. If he disapproves, he can discuss it with me when he returns." Eleanor met the housekeeper's hostile gaze steadily. "I am not asking for your opinion, Mrs. Rothwell. I am giving you an instruction. Lucas will be moved today. Is that clear?" The courtyard had gone very quiet. Every servant within earshot had stopped working to listen to this confrontation. Mrs. Rothwell's expression could have frozen fire. "Perfectly clear, Your Grace." "Excellent. I also want a full inventory of his current possessions and a list of what he needs. Proper clothes, books, toys appropriate for a 7-year-old boy, and I want the names of any staff members who have shown him kindness." "There are none, Your Grace." "None?" "The staff fears him, as they should." "Then we'll change that," Eleanor said. "Starting now. I want a meeting with all household staff in the main hall in 1 hour. No exceptions." Mrs. Rothwell's mouth compressed into a thin line. "As Your Grace wishes." The hour that followed was a whirlwind of preparation. Eleanor inspected the blue rooms, a lovely suite with a bedroom, sitting room, and small study. She ordered them cleaned, warmed, and furnished with items from storage. She had Annie help her go through the household linens to find appropriate bedding. She reviewed the kitchen stores and ordered special meals prepared. When the staff assembled in the main hall, their expressions ranged from curious to openly rebellious. Eleanor stood before them, her spine straight, her voice clear and carrying. I am aware that my arrival is unexpected and unwelcome to many of you. I am aware that you believe I will not last the winter. I am also aware that you have serious concerns about Lucas, the Duke's son, and his behavior. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled faces. I am here to tell you that things are changing. Starting today, Lucas will be treated as a member of this family deserves to be treated, with dignity, patience, and compassion. His rooms are being moved to the family wing. His care is now my direct responsibility. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I understand he has been difficult, Eleanor continued. I understand there have been incidents, but isolation and fear are not treatments for a traumatized child. They are cruelties that make trauma worse. We will try a different approach. And if he hurts someone, a male voice called from the back, if he sets another fire, then I will deal with the consequences, Eleanor said firmly. But I will not preemptively punish a child for things he might do. I will not continue to treat him as a monster when he is simply a wounded little boy. You don't know what he's like, another servant said. You haven't heard him scream, haven't seen him destroy things. You're right, I haven't, but I know what it's like to be dismissed and feared for things beyond your control. I know what it's like to be judged before anyone bothers to understand. Eleanor's voice softened slightly. I'm asking you to give him and me a chance, just a chance. The murmuring grew louder. Mrs. Rothwell stood rigid as stone, her expression carved from ice. Then, from the edge of the group, a weathered older man stepped forward. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but I worked for the old Duke, His Grace's father, and I knew the first Duchess, His Grace's mother. She was kind, like you're being now. She would have approved of what you're trying to do. Thank you, Eleanor said, meaning it. What's your name? Morrison, Your Grace. I'm the estate steward. Mr. Morrison, I'll need your help learning how this household operates. Will you assist me? Gladly, Your Grace. It wasn't much. One ally in a household of skeptics. But it was a start. Eleanor dismissed the staff and returned to the East Wing, where the blue rooms were nearly ready. She supervised the final preparations herself, ensuring everything was as welcoming as possible. Fresh flowers on the table, a warm fire in the hearth, books arranged on the shelves, soft blankets on the bed. When everything was ready, she returned to the North Tower. Lucas was still in the same corner, still wrapped in his blanket, but his eyes tracked her movement as she entered. Hello again, Eleanor said. I promised I'd come back. I'm going to keep doing that. Coming back, I mean. Every day. Why? Because you matter. Because you deserve better than this cold, lonely tower. Because I made you a promise. Eleanor knelt down again. I've prepared new rooms for you, Lucas. Warm rooms with windows that aren't barred and a real bed and books to read. Would you like to see them? Suspicion clouded his features. This is a trick. It's not a trick. People don't do nice things without wanting something. I want you to be safe and cared for. That's what I want. Eleanor extended her hand again. Will you come with me? Just to look. If you hate the new rooms, we can discuss alternatives. Lucas stared at her hand for a long time. Then slowly, tentatively, his small hand reached out and touched hers. His skin was ice cold. Eleanor gently closed her fingers around his and stood, bringing him with her. He was tiny, she realized, severely underweight and small even for his age. He trembled as they walked, whether from fear or cold or both, she couldn't tell. The staff they passed in the corridors pressed themselves against the walls, their faces fearful. Lucas's grip on Eleanor's hand tightened. It's all right, Eleanor murmured. They're just not used to seeing you. We'll change that. When they reached the blue rooms, Eleanor pushed open the door. Lucas stopped in the doorway, staring. His eyes went very wide. These are for me? He whispered. Yes, but they're nice. You deserve nice things, Lucas. He took a tentative step inside, then another. He touched the bed as if it might disappear. He moved to the window and looked out at the view, the sea, the cliffs, the vast gray sky. "I can see everything from here," he said, wonder creeping into his voice. "Yes, I thought you might like that." He turned to face her. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're my family now, and family takes care of each other." "But you don't even know me." "Then we'll get to know each other." Eleanor smiled. "Starting now. Tell me, Lucas, what's your favorite story?" Over the next 3 weeks, Eleanor learned exactly how difficult Lucas could be. The first night in his new rooms, he had a nightmare so violent he destroyed a lamp and injured his own hands clawing at the walls. Eleanor, sleeping in the adjacent room, heard his screams and rushed in to find him trapped in some memory, fighting invisible demons, completely unreachable. She didn't try to restrain him. She simply sat nearby and spoke softly, steadily, telling him he was safe, that the danger was over, that she was there. It took nearly an hour before he came back to himself, and when he did, he collapsed sobbing into her arms. The second week, he lashed out during a lesson, throwing books, and overturning furniture in a rage triggered by something Eleanor hadn't even identified. She calmly removed anything he could hurt himself with and waited until the storm passed, then helped him clean up the mess without judgment or punishment. "I'm bad," he said afterward, his voice small and broken. "I'm broken." That's what the governesses said. "You're not broken," Eleanor said firmly. "You're hurt. There's a difference. Hurt can heal." "Can it?" "I don't know yet, but we're going to try." Slowly, incrementally, progress emerged. Lucas began sleeping through some nights. His outbursts decreased in frequency and intensity. He started speaking more, asking questions, even occasionally smiling. The staff remained wary, but Eleanor noticed small shifts. Annie volunteered to bring Lucas's meals. Morrison started leaving small, carved wooden animals outside Lucas's door. Even Mrs. Rothwell's hostility seemed to thaw by a few degrees, though she remained rigidly disapproving. Eleanor threw herself into understanding Ironcrest's operations. She reviewed accounts, learned tenant names and situations, studied the shipping schedules that were the estate's primary income. She was shocked to discover how much money the estate generated and equally shocked by how inefficiently it was being managed. She started making changes, small ones at first, then bolder, as her confidence grew. She negotiated better terms with suppliers. She reallocated resources to improve tenant conditions. She identified opportunities Rowan Stewart had overlooked. Morrison was impressed. "You have a head for this, Your Grace. Better than many men I've seen." Eleanor smiled. "I've been reading about economics and trade for years. Finally, I get to use that knowledge." 3 weeks after Rowan's departure, Eleanor was in the estate office reviewing shipping manifests when Morrison rushed in, his face pale. "Your Grace, there's been an accident. Down at the harbor, one of the warehouses collapsed. Multiple workers injured. It's bad." Eleanor was on her feet immediately. "Get a cart. Gather medical supplies. I'm going down there." "Your Grace, perhaps we should wait for His Grace's return. There's no time. People are hurt. We're going. Now." The harbor was chaos. The warehouse had indeed collapsed, trapping workers under timber and stone. Men were digging frantically, pulling out injured colleagues. Blood stained the dock. Women wailed for their husbands and sons. Eleanor took control of the situation with a calmness that surprised even her. She organized the rescue efforts, assigned tasks, directed the distribution of medical supplies. She knelt in the mud beside injured workers, helping to bandage wounds and comfort the dying. She sent runners for the nearest doctor. She promised financial support to families who had lost breadwinners. For 6 hours, she worked without stopping. Her dress was ruined, her hands covered in blood and dirt. She didn't care. By the time the worst was over, 7 men were dead and 15 seriously injured. Eleanor stood on the dock as the sun set, staring at the destruction, and felt rage building in her chest. "This was preventable," she said to Morrison, who had worked beside her all afternoon. "The warehouse was poorly maintained. The support beams were rotting. This didn't have to happen." "I know, Your Grace. I warned His Grace about it months ago. He said he'd address it when he returned from his last trip. But then—" Morrison trailed off uncomfortably. "But then he got distracted by other business," Eleanor finished. "And 7 men are dead because of that distraction." She returned to Ironcrest and went directly to Rowan's study. She pulled out the maintenance records and reviewed them carefully. What she found enraged her further. Multiple warnings about structural issues. Multiple requests for funds that had been denied or delayed. A pattern of prioritizing shipping profits over worker safety. Rowan returned 2 days later, his carriage rolling through the gates just after dawn. Eleanor met him in the courtyard, still wearing a dress stained with workers' blood because she wanted him to see exactly what his negligence had caused. 7 men are dead, she said without preamble. Because you ignored warnings about the warehouse. Because profit mattered more than safety. Rowan's face went hard. I heard about the collapse. I came as quickly as I could. Not quickly enough. And it shouldn't have happened at all. Eleanor thrust the maintenance records at him. Look at these. 3 separate reports warning about structural problems. 3 requests for repairs. All ignored or delayed. I was prioritizing profit over people. I know. I've reviewed the accounts. You're making enormous sums from those shipping operations, Rowan. More than enough to maintain safe working conditions. But you chose not to. His eyes narrowed dangerously. You've been going through my private business records? Our business records. I'm your wife and the Duchess. I have every right to understand the operations I'm now part of. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. I spent 6 hours yesterday pulling dead men from rubble. I looked into the eyes of widows and fatherless children. I made promises to families who have nothing now because their providers are gone. Don't you dare lecture me about overstepping my authority. For a long moment, they stared at each other, a battle of wills crackling in the cold morning air. Finally, Rowan said, "You're right." Eleanor blinked. "What?" "You're right. I knew about the maintenance issues. I meant to address them. I got distracted by negotiations that seemed more immediately important." His voice was rough. "That's not an excuse. It's an explanation. Men died because I made the wrong choice about priorities. That's on me." The admission deflated some of Eleanor's anger. "What are you going to do about it?" "Immediate repairs to all structures. Safety inspections across all operations. Compensation to the families, generous compensation. And..." He paused. "I need you to take over operational oversight of the local facilities. Clearly, I can't be trusted to manage it properly while juggling other business." "You're giving me control?" "You've clearly proven you're more competent at it than I am, and you care more about the workers' welfare." Rowan's expression was difficult to read. "How did things go with Lucas?" The subject change was abrupt but welcome. "Better than expected. Worse than I hoped. He's still having nightmares, still struggling. But he's making progress." "Show me." They walked to the East Wing together. Rowan had been traveling for nearly a month and looked exhausted, but he straightened as they approached Lucas's rooms. Eleanor opened the door quietly. Lucas was at the desk, carefully copying letters from a book. He looked up as they entered, and his face transformed, fear flickering across it at the sight of his father. "Papa?" he said uncertainly. "Hello, Lucas." Rowan's voice was gentle in a way Eleanor had never heard before. "I hear you've moved to new rooms." Lucas nodded, his eyes darting to Eleanor as if seeking permission to speak. "Show your father what you've been learning," Eleanor encouraged. Slowly, Lucas stood and brought over his writing. "Eleanor has been teaching me. I can write my name now, and I've been reading stories." Rowan took the paper, studying his son's careful letters. Something in his expression cracked slightly. "This is excellent work, Lucas." "Really? Really?" Rowan knelt down, bringing himself to Lucas's level, the same thing Eleanor did. "I'm proud of you." Lucas stared at him, then abruptly threw his arms around his father's neck. Rowan froze for a moment, clearly shocked, then slowly, carefully, wrapped his arms around his son. Eleanor quietly left the room, giving them privacy. She was in her sitting room an hour later when Rowan knocked and entered. "He fell asleep," Rowan said. "While I was reading to him, just fell asleep. Like a normal child." "He is a normal child. Just one who's been through hell." Rowan sank into a chair, looking more exhausted than Eleanor had ever seen him. "I thought isolating him was protecting him. I didn't know what else to do." After Amelia died, after everything that happened, Lucas became impossible to reach. The nightmares, the violence, the fear. I convinced myself that keeping him separate was the kindest option. You were wrong. I know that now. He met her eyes. You've accomplished more in 3 weeks than I managed in 3 years. How? I didn't give up on him, and I didn't approach him as a problem to be solved, but as a child who needed love. Eleanor hesitated. Rowan, he told me something yesterday about the night your wife died. Rowan's face went rigid. What did he say? He said he tried to help her, that there was so much blood, and he tried to stop it with his hands, that he held the baby and felt it stop breathing, that he screamed for help, but no one came in time. Eleanor's voice broke slightly. He's been carrying guilt. He thinks he failed to save them. He was 3 years old, Rowan said hoarsely. There was nothing he could have done. But no one ever told him that. No one ever explained that it wasn't his fault. He spent 4 years believing he let his mother and sibling die. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. I didn't know. He never spoke about it. I thought silence was better than making him relive it. Silence just lets trauma fester. Eleanor moved closer. He needs you, Rowan, not just me. He needs his father to tell him that what happened wasn't his fault, that he's not broken or bad, that he's loved. I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. You just did it, holding him, reading to him, showing pride in his accomplishments. That's how you do it. One moment at a time. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, I misjudged you, Eleanor. Badly. I thought I was hiring a competent manager. I didn't realize I was gaining a partner who would fundamentally change how this household operates. Is that a complaint? No, it's an acknowledgement and an apology. I should have prepared you better for what you'd be walking into. I should have trusted you with more information. I should have... He trailed off. I should have treated you as an equal from the start instead of as hired help. You were honest about what you were offering. I accepted those terms. The terms were insufficient. You deserve better. Eleanor studied him, this hard, controlled man who was slowly revealing depths she hadn't anticipated. What are you saying, Rowan? I'm saying this marriage may have started as a practical arrangement, but you've proven yourself to be far more than I bargained for. You've transformed Lucas's life. You've improved operations I'd been neglecting. You've earned the respect of a household that was prepared to despise you. He paused. You've made Ironcrest feel less like a prison and more like a home. Eleanor's throat tightened. I'm just doing what needed to be done. No, you're doing what no one else had the courage or compassion to do. Rowan stood. I'm going to make changes, starting with putting you in charge of all local operations. You'll have full financial authority, full decision-making power. I trust your judgment more than my own. Rowan, and I'm staying at Ironcrest for the next 3 months. No more trips. Lucas needs stability, and you need support, not abandonment. His gray eyes met hers directly. I'm not good at this. Partnership, vulnerability, any of it. But I'm going to try. You've earned that much. Before Eleanor could respond, shouting erupted from somewhere below. They rushed to the corridor and found Mrs. Rothwell running toward them, her usual composure shattered. Your Grace! Your Grace! A rider has arrived from London. Viscount Belmont is here. He's demanding an audience. He's claiming... She stopped, her face pale. He's claiming the marriage is fraudulent, that Lady Eleanor was promised to him first, and that he's come to take her back to London. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Adrian Belmont was here, at Ironcrest, and apparently he'd decided that the woman he'd mocked as unsuitable was suddenly worth claiming after all. Eleanor felt Rowan go absolutely still beside her, the kind of predatory stillness that reminded her he'd commanded men in war. Tell Viscount Belmont, Rowan said, his voice dropping to a temperature that matched the North Sea outside, that he can wait in the receiving hall and send word to Morrison to gather the senior staff. If Belmont is making legal claims, he'll make them in front of witnesses. Mrs. Rothwell hurried away, and Rowan turned to Eleanor. Did you have any agreement with him? Any understanding, written or verbal, that could be construed as a promise? No. Eleanor's voice was steady despite the rage building in her chest. We spoke perhaps 3 times at social events. He never expressed romantic interest. Quite the opposite, in fact. Then why is he here? Because I'm suddenly worth something. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. I'm a duchess now. I have status, wealth, connection to you. The woman he mocked as unsuitable has become valuable, and Adrian Belmont has never been able to resist claiming something valuable. Rowan's eyes narrowed. He mocked you? Extensively, cruelly. I overheard him at the Ashford ball, remember? The night you witnessed. Eleanor met his gaze. He told his friends I was useful for conversation, but utterly unsuitable for anything more. That I lacked the physical appeal necessary for a proper wife. That he had standards. I remember. Something dangerous flickered across Rowan's face, and now he's here claiming prior rights to a woman he publicly dismissed. Interesting timing. They descended to the receiving hall, where Adrian Belmont stood examining a tapestry with the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to being welcomed everywhere. He wore traveling clothes that managed to look elegant despite the long journey, and his golden hair was artfully disheveled. He turned as they entered, and his smile was bright and utterly false. Your Grace, he said, bowing to Rowan with just enough deference to avoid insult. How kind of you to receive me. And Eleanor... His eyes swept over her, and she saw the calculation behind the charm. You're looking well. Northern life seems to agree with you. It's Lady Blackthorne, Eleanor said coldly. Or, Your Grace, we are not on familiar terms, Viscount Belmont. Adrian's smile faltered slightly. Of course. My apologies, old habits. He turned back to Rowan. Your Grace, I've come on a matter of some delicacy. I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding regarding your marriage to Her Grace. No misunderstanding, Rowan said flatly. I proposed, she accepted, we wed legally and completely. What's your claim? The lady and I had an understanding, nothing formal perhaps, but certainly implied through our frequent conversations and my clear interest. I was merely waiting for the appropriate time to make my intentions known to her father, when I learned, to my shock and dismay, that she'd been rushed into marriage with someone she barely knew. Eleanor laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made Adrian flinch. An understanding? You're claiming we had an understanding? Eleanor, I know you may have felt pressured by circumstances, by your father's financial situation. Do not, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to something dangerous, presume to tell me what I felt. We had no understanding, Adrian. We had 3 conversations about politics and economics, during which you seemed mildly entertained by my opinions. That is not an understanding. That is not courtship. That is you amusing yourself with someone you considered beneath you. Adrian's expression flickered between surprise and annoyance. You're upset. Understandably so. This marriage was clearly arranged in haste, without proper consideration. I considered it very carefully, Eleanor interrupted. I accepted Duke Blackthorne's proposal because it offered me respect, authority, and purpose. 3 things you never offered and never would have. That's not true. I had every intention. You had no intentions regarding me except as occasional intellectual entertainment. Eleanor stepped forward, her fury finally breaking free. Shall I tell the Duke what you really thought of me? Shall I repeat what you told Lord Ashworth and Mr. Pemberton in the library at the Ashford ball? Adrian went pale. I don't know what you think you heard. I heard you say I was useful for conversation, but utterly unsuitable for anything more. I heard you say you had standards and needed a wife who enhanced your reputation, not someone the ton mocked. I heard you say that if I were a man, you might enjoy my friendship, but as a woman I lacked the physical appeal necessary to compensate for being intelligent. Eleanor's voice shook slightly, but she didn't stop. You laughed about me with your friends while I sat in the shadows. You mocked my body, my worth, my very existence. And now you're standing in my home, claiming you had intentions toward me? You're either a liar or a fool, and I suspect you're both. The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian's face had gone from pale to flushed, his composure cracking. You misunderstood the context. I understood perfectly. And so did everyone else who heard you. Eleanor's voice steadied. You dismissed me as unsuitable when I was merely Lady Eleanor Whitford, second daughter of a struggling baron. Now that I'm the Duchess of Blackthorne, married to one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in England, suddenly I'm worth claiming. The mathematics aren't difficult, Adrian. Even you should be able to follow them. Morrison entered quietly, followed by several senior staff members. Rowan had clearly ordered witnesses assembled. Rowan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Viscount Belmont, I've heard your claim. Now hear my response. You have no legal standing. No contract existed between you and Lady Eleanor. No formal courtship took place. No promises were made. Your supposed understanding exists only in your imagination or your opportunism. Your Grace, if you'd simply listen, I'm not finished. Rowan's tone could have frozen flames. Furthermore, I've just learned that you publicly mocked and humiliated the woman who is now my wife. You called her unsuitable, mocked her appearance, and laughed about her with your friends. Do you deny this? Adrian's jaw worked. Private conversations taken out of context. Yes or no? Did you make those statements? The pause stretched too long. Finally, Adrian said, I may have made some ill-considered remarks in a private setting. So you admit it. You admit to publicly mocking the woman you're now claiming was promised to you. Rowan stepped forward, and despite Adrian being taller, he seemed to shrink in the Duke's presence. That's either breathtaking dishonesty or breathtaking stupidity. Given your current behavior, I'm inclined to believe it's both. Your Grace, I made a mistake. I failed to recognize Eleanor's worth at the time. Her name is Duchess Blackthorne, Rowan said icily. And her worth was never the issue. Your ability to recognize it was. Still is, apparently, since you seem to think she's a commodity to be claimed rather than a person who made her own choice. Adrian's face flushed darker. I have friends in London, influential friends. If you think you can dismiss me without consequences, is that a threat? Rowan's voice dropped to something lethal. Because if you're threatening my wife or my household, we can resolve this in a manner more traditional than legal proceedings. The implication was clear. Adrian went very still. Eleanor stepped between them, her hand on Rowan's arm. He's not worth it, she said quietly. Then, louder, to Adrian. You're not worth it. You never were. I wasted far too much time caring what you and people like you thought of me. I'm done with that. I'm done with you. She turned to Morrison. Please see Viscount Belmont to his horse. He's leaving, now. Adrian made one last attempt. Eleanor, Duchess, please. I made mistakes, yes, but I'm here to rectify them. I'm offering you a chance to return to London, to escape this frozen wilderness. This frozen wilderness is my home, Eleanor said. These people are my family. This life is mine, built on mutual respect and honest partnership. What are you offering me, Adrian? Pretty words that mean nothing? A return to a society that mocked me? Marriage to a man who valued me so little he joked about my unsuitability with his drinking companions? I can give you London, society, everything you left behind. Everything I left behind was worthless. Eleanor's voice rang with certainty. I found worth here. I found purpose here. I found people who see me as I actually am and value that. You're offering me a cage made of false promises and shallow regard. I already escaped that cage. I'm not going back. Adrian stared at her, genuine shock crossing his features. You actually mean that? I've never been more certain of anything. For a moment, something almost like regret flickered in Adrian's eyes. Then his expression hardened back into aristocratic disdain. You'll regret this. When winter truly sets in, when you're trapped in this stone prison with nothing but wind and darkness, you'll remember what you gave up. No, Eleanor said simply. I'll remember what I escaped. Morrison and 2 footmen escorted Adrian from the hall. His protests echoed through the corridors until the heavy doors cut them off. Eleanor stood very still, trying to process what had just happened. She'd faced down Adrian Belmont. She'd rejected him publicly. She'd chosen this life, this harsh, difficult, complicated life, over everything London represented. And she felt no regret, only relief. Eleanor, Rowan's voice was gentle. Are you all right? I'm better than all right. Eleanor turned to face him, and she was surprised to feel tears on her cheeks, not from sadness, but from something like liberation. I'm free. For the first time in my life, I'm actually free. Rowan's expression softened in a way she'd never seen. You were magnificent, absolutely magnificent. I was angry. You were powerful. There's a difference. He glanced at the assembled staff, who were watching with undisguised fascination. That will be all. Thank you for your witness. As the staff dispersed, whispers already spreading through the household, Rowan guided Eleanor to his study. He poured her a measure of brandy despite the early hour. Drink this. You're shaking. Eleanor accepted the glass and drank, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. He thought I'd be grateful. He actually thought I'd want to go back to London with him. He thought you were still the woman he knew in London, desperate for approval, willing to accept scraps of regard. Rowan sat across from her. He didn't account for the fact that you've changed, grown stronger. I haven't changed. I've just stopped pretending to be smaller than I am. Eleanor met his eyes. You gave me that. This place, this life, it gave me permission to be exactly who I am without apology. You gave yourself that permission. I just provided the environment. Rowan paused. But I want you to know something, Eleanor. If you had wanted to leave, if you'd asked me to dissolve the marriage and let you return to London, even with Belmont, I would have allowed it. I wouldn't have liked it, but I would have respected your choice. I know. That's one reason I'm staying, because you've never tried to control me. You've trusted me to make my own decisions. Even when those decisions involved completely reorganizing my household and operations? Eleanor smiled slightly, especially then. A knock at the door interrupted them. Annie entered, looking worried. Your Grace, it's Lucas. He's asking for you. He heard shouting, and he's frightened. Eleanor was on her feet immediately. Where is he? In his rooms. He's locked himself in the wardrobe. Eleanor hurried to the east wing, Rowan close behind. In Lucas's bedroom, they found the wardrobe door firmly shut and small, frightened breathing coming from inside. Eleanor knelt beside it. Lucas, it's Eleanor. Can you hear me? There was shouting. His voice was muffled and terrified. Like that night, when Mama was screaming. Is someone hurt? Is someone dying? Eleanor's heart broke. No one's hurt, sweetheart. There was an argument, that's all. A visitor said some untrue things, and your father and I corrected him. Everyone is safe. Promise? I promise. No one is hurt. No one is dying. We're all safe. A long pause. Then, can you open the door? I can't reach the latch from inside. Eleanor carefully opened the wardrobe and found Lucas curled in the corner, his arms wrapped around his knees, his face wet with tears. Come here, she said gently, extending her hands. Lucas scrambled out and into her arms, clinging to her with desperate strength. She held him, rocking slightly, murmuring reassurances. Rowan knelt beside them. Lucas, I'm sorry you were frightened. The shouting was my fault. I should have been more careful about where we confronted the visitor. Lucas looked at his father over Eleanor's shoulder. Who was he? Why was he here? Someone who made a mistake and came to try to fix it, Rowan said. But the mistake was too big to fix, so we sent him away. Will he come back? No, he won't come back. Rowan's voice held absolute certainty. This is our home, Lucas. We decide who enters, and that man is not welcome here. Lucas considered this. Eleanor stood up to him. I heard her voice. She wasn't scared. Your stepmother is very brave, Rowan said. I want to be brave like her. Eleanor's throat tightened. You're already brave, Lucas. Do you know how brave you have to be to keep trying after everything you've been through? That's the bravest thing I know. Lucas pulled back slightly to look at her face. You really think I'm brave? I know you are. He studied her for a moment, then turned to his father. Are you staying now or leaving again? Staying, Rowan said firmly. For a long time. I've been gone too much. I'm staying home now. Something in Lucas's expression transformed, hope blooming in a place that had been empty for so long. Both of you? You're both staying? Both of us, Eleanor confirmed. This is home now, for all of us. Lucas looked between them, and then, to Eleanor's shock, he reached out and pulled Rowan into the embrace as well. For a long moment, the three of them knelt on the floor in Lucas's room, holding each other, a family beginning to heal from wounds both old and new. The following weeks brought changes that rippled through Ironcrest like stones dropped in still water. Eleanor implemented the safety improvements she'd promised to the workers' families, personally overseeing inspections and repairs. She attended funerals for the men who died in the warehouse collapse, standing in the rain beside their graves and promising their widows that Ironcrest would support them. She established a fund for worker injuries and families who lost breadwinners. She created protocols for maintenance and safety that would prevent future disasters. The workers noticed. The community noticed. At first, they remained wary, another Duchess playing at benevolence, they assumed. But Eleanor kept showing up. She learned names. She listened to concerns. She made decisions and followed through on promises. Slowly, wariness transformed into trust. Morrison became her willing accomplice in reorganizing estate operations. Together, they identified inefficiencies, renegotiated contracts, and implemented systems that increased productivity while improving worker conditions. "You have a gift for this, Your Grace," Morrison said one afternoon as they reviewed improved harvest yields. "Most nobles treat estate management as an afterthought. You treat it as a craft." "Because it matters," Eleanor replied. "These decisions affect real people's lives. That's not an afterthought. That's everything." Mrs. Rothwell proved harder to win over, but even her iron resistance began to crack. It happened gradually, a moment when Eleanor's decision about household accounts proved correct, another when Eleanor's approach to a staff dispute resolved tensions Mrs. Rothwell had struggled with for months. The housekeeper never became warm, but she became respectful, and that was enough. "You're not what I expected, Your Grace," Mrs. Rothwell said one morning, the closest she'd ever come to a compliment. "What did you expect?" "Someone soft. Someone who would run when faced with difficulty." The housekeeper's expression was unreadable. "I was wrong. I appreciate you saying so." "I don't say things I don't mean, Your Grace. It's inefficient." Eleanor smiled. Coming from Mrs. Rothwell, that was practically a declaration of devotion. But the most profound changes occurred with Lucas. With both Eleanor and Rowan present, Lucas began emerging from the protective shell he'd built around himself. The nightmares didn't stop completely, but they decreased. The violent outbursts became rarer. He started speaking more, asking questions, even laughing occasionally. Rowan relearned how to be a father, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. He read to Lucas every night. He taught his son about the shipping business, about history, about the world beyond Ironcrest's walls. He held Lucas during nightmares and stayed until the boy fell back asleep. Eleanor watched this relationship rebuild itself and felt something warm and unexpected growing in her chest. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not effortless, but real and committed and worth fighting for. One evening, 6 weeks after Adrian's failed attempt to reclaim her, Eleanor sat in the library reviewing accounts when Rowan entered. "You're working late," he observed. "I found a discrepancy in the Liverpool shipping contracts. I want to resolve it before it becomes a larger problem." Rowan sat across from her. "You've transformed this estate, Eleanor. Profits are up, worker satisfaction has improved, accident rates have dropped. You've accomplished in 2 months what I failed to do in 5 years. You were managing alone. I have help. Morrison, the staff, you." "Even so." Rowan paused. "I've been thinking about our arrangement, about the terms we agreed to." Eleanor set down her pen, sudden anxiety tightening her chest. "What about them?" "They were too limited, too transactional. You deserve better." "Rowan, I don't understand. I'm saying our marriage began as a practical arrangement, but it's become something more, at least for me." His gray eyes met hers directly. "You're not just a capable manager, Eleanor. You're a partner, a true partner. You've made Lucas's life worth living again. You've made Ironcrest feel like a home instead of a fortress. You've made me remember that there's more to life than business and obligation." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I respect you, I admire you, I trust you." Rowan leaned forward. "And I'm beginning to feel things I didn't expect to feel again. Things I thought died with Amelia." "Rowan, I'm not asking you to feel the same. You came here for escape and purpose, not romance." I understand that. But I wanted you to know that if you ever wanted this marriage to be more than a practical arrangement, I would welcome that, eagerly. Eleanor stared at him, trying to process this unexpected confession. She'd been so focused on survival, on building a life, on helping Lucas, that she hadn't allowed herself to examine her own feelings. But now, sitting in this quiet library with the North Sea roaring outside and this hard, honorable man looking at her with something like hope, she realized her feelings had been changing too. She'd started to care about Rowan. Not the desperate, consuming infatuation she'd briefly felt for Adrian, but something steadier and deeper. She respected his integrity, admired his intelligence, appreciated his willingness to change and grow. She'd watched him transform from a distant, controlling father into someone patient and present with his son, and that transformation had touched something in her heart. "I need time," she said quietly, "to understand what I'm feeling. This is all very new, and I don't want to make promises I'm not certain I can keep." "Take all the time you need," Rowan said. "I'm not going anywhere." Before Eleanor could respond, shouting erupted from the courtyard below. They rushed to the window and looked down. In the torchlight, they could see riders arriving, several men on horseback, travel-worn and urgent. Morrison appeared at the library door, breathing hard. Your Grace, riders from London. They carry urgent news." "What news?" Rowan demanded. "Viscount Belmont, Your Grace. He's been arrested." Eleanor and Rowan exchanged glances. "Arrested for what?" "Fraud, Your Grace. Massive fraud. Apparently he's been living far beyond his means for years, borrowing against his inheritance and falsifying investments. His creditors finally caught up with him. He owes tens of thousands of pounds he can't pay. His estate is being seized. He's facing debtor's prison." The implications settled over Eleanor like snow. Adrian's sudden interest in reclaiming her hadn't been about love or regret. It had been pure desperation. He'd needed her connection to Rowan's wealth to save himself from financial ruin. "There's more," Morrison said grimly. "The riders say rumors are spreading through London. About his treatment of you, Your Grace. About what he said at the Ashford ball. Someone, they won't say who, has been spreading the story of how he mocked you publicly and then tried to claim you once you'd married into wealth. Society is turning on him. They're calling him a fortune hunter and a hypocrite." Eleanor sank into a chair, feeling oddly detached. The man who had humiliated her, who had tried to reclaim her as property, was now facing complete social and financial destruction. She felt no satisfaction in his fall, only a distant pity for someone who had valued the wrong things and paid the ultimate price. "I suppose I should feel vindicated," she said quietly. "Do you?" Rowan asked. "No, I feel free. Completely free. His opinion of me, his mockery, his desperate attempt to reclaim me, none of it matters anymore." It never really did. Eleanor looked up at Rowan. "He has no power over me. He never did, except what I gave him by caring about his judgment. And I don't care anymore." "What do you care about?" Rowan asked gently. Eleanor stood and moved to the window, looking out at the dark cliffs and the churning sea. "I care about Lucas learning to sleep through the night without nightmares. I care about the workers having safe conditions and fair pay. I care about making Ironcrest prosperous and sustainable. I care about—" She turned to face Rowan. "I care about the people in this fortress who've become my family. That's what matters. That's what's real." Rowan crossed to her and very carefully took her hand. "You've built something remarkable here, Eleanor. You took a fortress full of fear and isolation and transformed it into a home. You took a broken child and helped him heal. You took a man who'd forgotten how to feel anything beyond duty and reminded him what it means to care. I didn't do it alone. No, but you led the way." Rowan's thumb traced across her knuckles. "I know you need time to understand your feelings, but I want you to know mine. I'm falling in love with you, Eleanor Blackthorne. Slowly, carefully, but absolutely. And whether you ever love me back or not, I will spend the rest of my life grateful that you agreed to marry me." Eleanor's breath caught. She looked at this man, this hard, honorable, complicated man who'd offered her escape and given her so much more, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not the desperate infatuation she'd once confused for love, but something deeper and more durable. trust, respect, partnership, and yes, the beginning of love. "Ask me again in a month," she said quietly. "Ask me what I'm feeling then." Rowan smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "I will." The news of Adrian's arrest spread through Ironcrest's household with remarkable speed. By morning, every servant knew that the man who'd tried to reclaim their Duchess had been exposed as a fraud and a fortune hunter. Eleanor expected gossip and speculation. What she didn't expect was the fierce protectiveness the staff displayed. "Good riddance to him," Annie said while helping Eleanor dress. "Thinking he could come here and claim you like property, as if you'd want a man who only valued you once you had a title." Mrs. Rothwell, in her own austere way, expressed similar sentiments. "The Viscount revealed his character with his behavior. You were wise to refuse him, Your Grace, very wise." Even the outdoor staff, men who'd barely spoken to Eleanor beyond basic courtesies, expressed satisfaction that the London dandy had gotten what he deserved. Eleanor realized with a start that she'd earned something she'd never had in London: genuine loyalty. These people weren't protecting her reputation or maintaining appearances. They were defending someone they'd come to respect. 3 days later, a letter arrived from Georgiana. "Dearest Eleanor, London is absolutely buzzing with the scandal. Adrian Belmont's arrest has exposed him as a fraud and a fortune hunter, and the story of how he mocked you at the Ashford ball before trying to reclaim you as a duchess has made him a social pariah. I won't lie, I may have helped spread that particular story. He deserved to have his cruelty exposed, but more importantly, I need to know, are you happy, truly happy? I know you left London to escape mockery and build a new life, but I need to hear from you that Ironcrest is giving you what you need. Please write back and tell me everything. I miss you terribly, but I'm also so proud of you for choosing yourself over society's expectations." With love, Georgiana Eleanor wrote back that same evening, and for the first time she could honestly say she was happy. Not perfectly, effortlessly happy, but genuinely content with the life she was building. That night, as Eleanor was preparing for bed, Lucas knocked on her door. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice small. "Of course." He padded into her sitting room in his nightshirt, looking young and vulnerable. "I had a dream. Not a nightmare, just a dream. About Mama." Eleanor guided him to sit beside her near the fire. "Tell me about it." "She was smiling. She told me she was proud of me, that she was happy I found you." Lucas looked up at Eleanor with those two old eyes. "Do you think she would be proud of me?" "I know she would be. You're brave and kind and so much stronger than you know." "I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about never being afraid, Lucas. It's about being afraid and trying anyway." "You do that every day." Lucas leaned against her shoulder. "I'm glad you came here. I'm glad Papa married you instead of someone else." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I'm glad too. Can I tell you something?" "Anything." "I heard Papa tell Morrison that he's falling in love with you." Lucas looked up at her. "Is that okay? Are you angry?" Eleanor was stunned. "Why would I be angry?" "Because love makes people die sometimes. Mama loved us, and she died. What if Papa loves you and something bad happens?" The question revealed layers of trauma Eleanor hadn't fully understood. Lucas wasn't just grieving his mother. He'd connected love with death, with loss, with terrible things happening to people he cared about. "Lucas, listen to me very carefully. Your mother didn't die because she loved you. She died because of complications during childbirth, something that sometimes happens and has nothing to do with love. Love didn't hurt her. Love gave her joy while she was alive. But she's still gone." "Yes, and that's terribly sad, and it's okay to be sad about it. But her love for you didn't cause her death. Those are two completely separate things." Eleanor pulled him closer. "And your father loving me won't cause anything bad to happen either. Love makes people want to protect each other, to take care of each other. It makes us stronger, not weaker." Lucas thought about this for a long time. Finally, he said, "Do you love Papa too?" Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "I'm beginning to. It's different from what I thought love would feel like, but I think it might be better, more real." "That's good," Lucas said, sounding relieved. "Because Papa smiles more now. And so do you. And I like it when people smile. Eleanor held him until he fell asleep against her shoulder, then carefully carried him back to his room. Rowan was there, having just come upstairs, and his expression when he saw Eleanor carrying his sleeping son was something she would treasure. "He had a dream about his mother," Eleanor whispered. "A good one, but he was worried." About? About love leading to loss. He's connected the two in his mind. Rowan's face crumpled slightly. "I didn't realize. I should have. You couldn't have known, but we know now. We can help him understand that love doesn't cause tragedy, that it's okay to love and be loved." Together, they tucked Lucas into bed. Rowan kissed his son's forehead, a gesture Eleanor had never seen him make before, and something warm bloomed in her chest. As they left Lucas's room, Rowan caught Eleanor's hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. For seeing him when everyone else looked away. For staying when everyone expected you to run. For making this fortress into a home." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Thank you for giving me the chance to do it. For offering me escape and giving me purpose. For trusting me with your son and your household and your life." They stood in the corridor, hands linked, and for the first time since arriving at Ironcrest, Eleanor felt completely at peace. She had been the woman everyone mocked, the woman deemed unsuitable and unworthy. Now she was the Duchess who had transformed a fortress, healed a broken child, and proven that strength came in forms society refused to recognize. And she was beginning to believe she might also be a woman learning how to love and be loved in return. The story wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more difficulties, more growth required. But standing in that shadowed corridor with Rowan's hand warm in hers and Lucas sleeping peacefully nearby, Eleanor knew she had already won the most important battle, the fight to be herself, unapologetically and completely. And nothing, not Adrian's mockery, not society's judgment, not even her own doubts, could take that victory away. Winter arrived at Ironcrest with a fury that transformed the fortress into something from a fairy tale, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. Snow piled against the stone walls in drifts taller than a man. The North Sea turned black and violent, waves crashing against the cliffs with such force that spray reached the highest windows. The wind howled day and night, a constant presence that seemed determined to tear the fortress from its foundations. Eleanor stood at her sitting room window one morning in late January, watching the storm rage outside, and felt nothing but contentment. 6 months ago, this isolation would have terrified her. Now it felt like protection. The world's noise and judgment kept at bay by wind and snow and distance. Behind her, Rowan worked at the desk they now shared, reviewing shipping manifests while she finalized household accounts. They'd fallen into this companionable routine over the past months, working side by side in comfortable silence or easy conversation. It felt natural in a way Eleanor had never experienced with anyone. "The Liverpool contracts are ready for your review," Rowan said without looking up. "I incorporated your suggestions about worker profit sharing. Morrison thinks it's revolutionary." "Morrison is too kind. It's simply practical. Workers who share in profits work harder and more carefully. Fewer accidents, better productivity, higher morale." "Revolutionary," Rowan repeated, but he was smiling. "You've revolutionized this entire estate, Eleanor. Might as well revolutionize labor relations, too." A knock interrupted them. Annie entered, looking excited. "Your Grace, a letter arrived. From London. From the Baroness, your sister, Lady Cecilia." Eleanor accepted the letter with surprise. She and Cecilia had never been particularly close, separated by temperament and her sister's marriage. She broke the seal and read, her expression shifting from curiosity to astonishment. "What is it?" Rowan asked, noticing her reaction. "Cecilia is coming to visit, with her husband. They'll arrive in 2 weeks, weather permitting." Eleanor reread the letter to make sure she'd understood correctly. "She says she wants to see how I'm managing in such challenging circumstances, and that London society is consumed with curiosity about the Duchess of Blackthorne who transformed a fortress and refused a Viscount's desperate proposal." "Society's curiosity or your sister's?" "Both, I suspect." Eleanor set down the letter. "This is unusual. Cecilia has never expressed interest in visiting before. I wonder what's prompted it. Perhaps genuine concern? Or perhaps she wants to see for herself that the sister she once pitied is now outranking her in social standing." Eleanor laughed. You have a devious mind. I'm a businessman. I understand human motivation. Rowan stood and crossed to her. How do you feel about this visit? Uncertain. Cecilia and I were never close. She's 5 years older, married well, and always treated me with a mixture of pity and mild condescension. Now, Eleanor gestured around the comfortable room at the accounts showing prosperous estate management, at the life she'd built. Now the situation is reversed. I don't know how she'll react. Then we'll find out together. Rowan's hand rested on her shoulder. You've faced down more difficult challenges than a sister's jealousy. The 2 weeks before Cecilia's arrival were consumed with preparations. Not because Eleanor wanted to impress her sister, she'd moved beyond needing that kind of validation, but because she took pride in Ironcrest now and wanted it to shine. The fortress had transformed over the months. What had been austere and forbidding now felt warm and welcoming. Eleanor had gradually introduced changes, better lighting in the corridors, tapestries that reduced the echo and added color, comfortable furniture that invited people to linger. The staff had embraced these changes, taking pride in maintaining a household that felt like a home rather than a military outpost. Lucas had transformed too. He was still cautious, still prone to nightmares, but he smiled now. He laughed. He'd started lessons with a patient tutor Eleanor had hired from a nearby town, and he was thriving academically. He'd even made friends with Morrison's grandson, a boy his own age from the village. Watching them play in the snow-covered courtyard, Eleanor felt a fierce protective joy. He's doing so well, Rowan said one evening, watching his son through the window. I can hardly believe he's the same frightened child locked in that tower cell. He was never the problem, Eleanor said. The isolation was. The fear was. He just needed someone to see past it. He needed you. He needed both of us. And Annie, and Morrison, and even Mrs. Rothwell in her stern way. He needed a community that refused to give up on him. Rowan's arm slipped around her waist, a gesture that had become increasingly common and increasingly welcome. We make a good team. We do, Eleanor agreed, leaning into his warmth. Their relationship had deepened over the winter months. They hadn't rushed into romance, both were too practical for that, but affection had grown steadily between them. Rowan had kept his promise to ask again about Eleanor's feelings, and she'd answered honestly. She was falling in love with him, slowly and certainly, in a way that felt nothing like her foolish infatuation with Adrian and everything like building a foundation meant to last. They'd shared their first kiss 3 weeks ago, during a walk along the cliffs on a rare clear day. It had been tentative, questioning, and then deepening into something that promised much more. They'd agreed to take things slowly, but Eleanor knew, they both knew, that this marriage had transformed into something real and lasting. Cecilia and her husband, Lord Edmund Hastings, arrived on a gray February afternoon when the snow had paused, but the cold remained brutal. Their carriage rolled through Ironcrest's gates, looking travel-worn and battered by the journey. Eleanor greeted them in the courtyard, Rowan at her side. She'd dressed carefully in a deep blue gown that proclaimed both Duchess status and practical northern sensibility. Her hair was simply styled, her bearing confident. Cecilia emerged from the carriage looking elegant and exhausted. She was blonde where Eleanor was dark, delicate where Eleanor was substantial. And her expression as she took in Ironcrest was complex, part curiosity, part apprehension, part something that might have been envy. Eleanor, she said, embracing her sister carefully, you look, well, remarkably well. Thank you. Welcome to Ironcrest. Eleanor turned to Rowan. This is my husband, Duke Rowan Blackthorne. Rowan, my sister Lady Cecilia Hastings, and her husband Lord Edmund. The men exchanged greetings while Cecilia continued studying Eleanor with barely concealed surprise. I expected you to look more weathered, Cecilia said as they moved inside, away from the wind. The journey north was brutal. I can't imagine enduring this climate constantly. You adjust, Eleanor said simply. The cold becomes familiar, even welcome. Welcome? Eleanor, the wind nearly tore our carriage apart twice. How can you call this welcome? Because it protects us. Because it keeps the shallow and superficial away. Because only people with real purpose brave this weather, and that makes for better company. Cecilia blinked, clearly taken aback by this response. The evening meal was formal but comfortable. Lucas joined them, a decision Eleanor had made deliberately, wanting her sister to see the child she'd helped heal. Lucas was nervous around strangers but handled himself well, speaking quietly when addressed and demonstrating the manners Eleanor and his tutor had worked on. "He's charming," Cecilia said after Lucas had been excused. "Nothing like the rumors suggested." "What rumors?" Eleanor's voice had an edge. "Oh, you know London. There were whispers that the Duke's son was troubled, difficult. Some even said dangerous." Cecilia waved her hand dismissively. "Clearly nonsense. He seems like a perfectly pleasant child." "He was troubled," Eleanor said firmly. "He was traumatized and isolated and treated like a monster instead of a wounded child. What you saw tonight, that calm, pleasant boy, is the result of months of patient work, compassion, and refusing to give up on him." "I didn't mean to imply—" "Yes, you did. You implied the rumors were nonsense because he seems normal now. They weren't nonsense. They were just based on a situation that has since changed. Lucas was exactly as troubled as reported. We healed him. There's a difference." Rowan's hand found Eleanor's under the table, a silent show of support. Lord Edmund cleared his throat awkwardly. "The estate seems remarkably well managed. Morrison was telling me about the improvements you've implemented, Your Grace. Quite impressive." Eleanor welcomed the subject change and spent the next hour discussing estate management, worker conditions, and the shipping operations that funded everything. She noticed Cecilia's expression shifting from polite interest to genuine surprise to something approaching disbelief. "You're managing all of this?" Cecilia interrupted finally. "The accounts, the workers, the shipping schedules, all of it?" "With Morrison's help and Rowan's guidance, yes." "Why does that surprise you?" "Because we were raised the same way, Eleanor, taught to embroider and play piano and manage a household in the most basic sense. Where did you learn economics and labor management and maritime commerce?" "From Father's library. I've been reading about these subjects for years. You just never noticed because you were busy being decorative." The words came out harsher than Eleanor intended, and Cecilia's face flushed. "I didn't mean—" Eleanor began, but Cecilia interrupted. "No, you're right. I was decorative. That's what I was raised to be, what I thought a woman should be. Beautiful, accomplished in the appropriate arts, skilled at managing a household and entertaining guests. I thought that was enough." Cecilia's voice was tight. "And it was enough to catch an earl's heir and make a good marriage. But watching you now, hearing what you've accomplished, Eleanor, you've built something real here, something meaningful. I've spent 5 years being decorative, and what do I have to show for it?" The vulnerability in Cecilia's voice surprised Eleanor. She'd expected jealousy, condescension, maybe resentment, not this honest self-reflection. "You have a marriage," Eleanor said more gently. "A position in society, security." "I have an arrangement," Cecilia corrected. "Edmund is kind enough, but we barely speak beyond social necessities. I manage his household and hostess his parties and look appropriately elegant at his side. That's my entire function, whereas you—" she gestured around the room. "You're building something. You matter here, not just as decoration, but as an actual force shaping this community." "Cecilia, I didn't come here to criticize you, Eleanor. I came because I needed to understand how you did it, how you escaped the cage we were both raised in and built something real." Cecilia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I need to know if it's too late for me to do the same." The conversation shifted after that confession. Over the following days, Eleanor showed Cecilia everything: the estate operations, the worker housing she'd improved, the schools she'd helped establish in the village. She introduced her sister to the workers and their families, let her see the respect and genuine affection they showed their Duchess. Cecilia absorbed it all with growing wonder. "They actually like you," she said one afternoon as they walked through the village. "Not because you're a duchess, but because you've genuinely helped them. I treat them like human beings deserving of dignity and fair compensation. It's not revolutionary, it's basic decency." "In London, it would be revolutionary." Cecilia paused. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something about why I really came." They were alone in Eleanor's sitting room, the fire crackling, snow falling heavily outside. Eleanor waited. Adrian Belmont's arrest made waves through London society, Cecilia began. But it was the stories that followed about how he'd mocked you, dismissed you, then desperately tried to claim you once you had value. Those stories changed everything. Changed what? How society sees you. How they see women like us, women who don't fit the delicate, decorative ideal. Cecilia's jaws twisted in her lap. Suddenly, people are questioning whether beauty and compliance are really the highest values in a wife. They're looking at you, this woman they once mocked for being too substantial, too intelligent, too much, and seeing someone who transformed a duchy and healed a traumatized child and built something meaningful. You've become legendary, Eleanor. Eleanor laughed in disbelief. That's absurd. It's not. Women are talking about you in drawing rooms, about how you refuse to shrink yourself, how you chose purpose over approval. You've become a symbol. A symbol of what? Of the possibility that we might be worth more than our appearance and social graces. Cecilia met her eyes. That's why I came, not just to see how you were managing, but to understand how you did it, how you broke free. Because I want to do the same. Eleanor studied her sister, really looked at her for perhaps the first time, and saw not the perfect, confident woman she'd always envied, but someone trapped and desperate to escape. It wasn't easy, Eleanor said honestly, and it required giving up everything familiar. Are you prepared for that? I don't know, but I know I can't keep living the way I have been, empty and decorative and increasingly invisible. Cecilia's voice broke slightly. Tell me it's not too late. Tell me there's a way forward. Over the next week, Eleanor shared everything she'd learned about estate management, about asserting authority without apology, about finding purpose beyond social approval. She introduced Cecilia to Morrison, who explained the basics of agricultural management. She showed her sister the account books, the shipping schedules, the complex web of decisions that kept Ironcrest prosperous. Cecilia absorbed it all with an intensity that surprised Eleanor. Her sister had a quick mind when she allowed herself to use it, and Eleanor realized with a start that Cecilia might have always had this capacity. She'd just never been encouraged or permitted to develop it. One evening, they sat together while snow fell outside and the fortress settled into nighttime quiet. I'm going to go back to Edmund and tell him I want real responsibility, Cecilia said. Not just household management, but actual involvement in estate operations. If he refuses, she paused. I don't know what I'll do, but I know I can't go back to being purely decorative. He may surprise you, Eleanor said. Rowan certainly surprised me. He gave me authority not because he had to, but because he recognized I was capable of wielding it well. Edmund might do the same, and if he doesn't, then you make difficult choices. But Cecilia, you're stronger than you think. You've spent years being what others expected. It's time to be what you actually are. Cecilia embraced her sister tightly. Thank you for showing me this was possible, for being brave enough to choose yourself. When Cecilia and Edmund departed a few days later, the goodbye was warmer than the greeting had been. As their carriage rolled away through the snow, Rowan appeared at Eleanor's side. That went well, I think. Better than expected, Eleanor leaned against him. She came here expecting to pity me or feel superior. Instead, she found something she needed. You gave her hope. That's a powerful gift. Inside, Lucas was waiting with Morrison, reviewing a new set of mathematics problems. He looked up as Eleanor entered, and his smile was bright and genuine. Did they leave? He asked. Yes. What did you think of them? Lucas considered carefully. Lady Cecilia was nice, she asked good questions, and she looked at you like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. That's very perceptive. Morrison says perception is a valuable skill. Morrison is right. Eleanor ruffled his hair, a gesture he now permitted and even seemed to enjoy. How are the mathematics going? Hard, but good hard, the kind that makes your brain stronger. Eleanor felt warmth flood her chest. This was the child who'd been locked in a tower, dismissed as broken and dangerous. Now he was tackling mathematics, making friends, speaking in complete sentences about perception and brain strength. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. That night, as Eleanor prepared for bed, Rowan knocked on her door. "May I come in?" "Of course." He entered, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. In his hand was a small velvet box. Eleanor's heart began to pound. "I know we're already married," Rowan said, his voice rough. "I know we exchanged vows and rings months ago in London, but those vows were practical, transactional. I want to give you something different now." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not the simple wedding band she wore, but an exquisite piece featuring a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "This was my mother's," Rowan said. "She was the Duchess before Amelia, before me. She was strong and intelligent and absolutely refused to be diminished by my father's expectations. He eventually learned to respect that strength, even to treasure it. He took Eleanor's hand. You remind me of her. That same steel wrapped in compassion, that same refusal to apologize for taking up space." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I want to marry you again," Rowan continued. "Not legally, we're already bound that way, but in the way that matters, with vows that mean something beyond contracts and arrangements. I want to promise to love you, honor you, stand beside you as an equal partner for the rest of our lives. Will you accept this ring and these promises?" Eleanor looked at the man she'd married for escape and discovered was worth staying for. She thought about the months they'd spent building something real together, a household, a family, a partnership founded on mutual respect and growing affection. She thought about how he'd trusted her with authority, supported her decisions, defended her against Adrian's claims, how he'd learned to be a father again because she'd shown him how he'd made space for her to be exactly who she was without apology. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Yes, Rowan. I accept." He slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, not tentatively as before, but with certainty and promise and the kind of passion that spoke of futures built together. When they finally parted, both breathless, Eleanor said, "I love you. I should have said it before, but I was afraid." "I know, we both were." Rowan cupped her face gently. "We married as strangers seeking practical solutions. We're choosing each other now as people who've learned who the other really is. That matters more than any romantic courtship could." "Stay," Eleanor said. "Tonight. Stay with me." Rowan's eyes darkened. "Are you certain?" "Completely." What happened next was private and precious. Two people choosing each other fully, without reservation, building the kind of intimacy that transcended contracts and transformed a practical arrangement into a genuine marriage in every sense. Spring arrived gradually at Ironcrest, the brutal winter releasing its grip 1 degree at a time. The snow melted, revealing green beneath. The sea calmed slightly, its violence tempered by warming temperatures. Flowers appeared in the fortress gardens, hardy northern varieties that thrived in harsh conditions. Eleanor stood in those gardens one April morning, watching Lucas and Morrison's grandson play among the early blooms, and felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. "Your Grace!" Annie came running, breathless with excitement. "A letter! From London! From Parliament!" Eleanor accepted the official-looking correspondence with curiosity. She broke the seal and read, her eyes widening. The letter was from a parliamentary committee investigating labor conditions in manufacturing and shipping operations. They had heard of the reforms implemented at Ironcrest, the safety improvements, the profit-sharing arrangements, the worker housing standards. They were requesting Eleanor's testimony about these innovations, hoping to use her methods as a model for broader labor reform legislation. They were inviting her to address Parliament. Eleanor read the letter 3 times, making sure she understood correctly. Parliament wanted her, a woman, a duchess who'd been mocked and dismissed, to testify about labor reform, to share her innovations with the nation's lawmakers. She showed Rowan the letter that evening. "This is extraordinary, he said, reading carefully. "They're essentially asking you to shape national policy. It's probably just a formality. They'll listen politely and do what they would have done anyway." "No," Rowan's voice was firm. "They're reaching out because what you've accomplished here is genuinely groundbreaking. You've proven that treating workers with dignity and fair compensation increases productivity and profitability. That's powerful evidence for policy reform." "You think I should go?" "I think you should absolutely go." This is your chance to impact not just Ironcrest, but potentially working conditions across England. He paused. And it's your chance to walk back into London, not as the woman they mocked, but as someone they must respect and listen to. I don't need London's respect anymore. I know, but perhaps London needs to see what they missed when they dismissed you. Perhaps other women need to see that being intelligent and substantial and refusing to shrink makes you powerful, not unworthy. Eleanor thought about Cecilia, about the women who'd heard her story and started questioning whether decorative compliance was truly their highest calling. She thought about all the Eleanor Whitfords still trapped in London drawing rooms, believing they were too much or not enough, waiting for someone to show them another way forward. I'll go, she said. We'll go. All of us, you, me, and Lucas, as a family. The journey to London took 5 days. They traveled in comfort, making leisurely stops, arriving in early May when the city was blooming and beautiful. Eleanor had written ahead to Georgiana, who had insisted they stay with her family rather than in a hotel. When their carriage pulled up to the familiar London townhouse, Georgiana burst out the front door with undisguised joy. Eleanor! Oh, Eleanor, you look magnificent! She embraced her friend fiercely. And this must be Duke Blackthorne and young Lucas. Welcome, welcome, all of you. The house was warm and welcoming, and Georgiana's enthusiasm was infectious. Over dinner, she filled them in on London gossip, most of which centered on Adrian Belmont's spectacular fall and the shifting attitudes toward women of substance. You've become quite famous, Georgiana said. Women are hosting salons to discuss your story. There's even talk of a society forming to promote women's education in economics and estate management. That's absurd, Eleanor protested. It's not. You've proven something important, Eleanor, that women can be more than decorative. That we can wield real power and do it well. Georgiana squeezed her hand. You've given people permission to imagine different futures. The parliamentary testimony was scheduled for 2 days later. Eleanor spent the intervening time preparing, reviewing her data, organizing her arguments, practicing her presentation with Rowan's help. Lucas, meanwhile, discovered London with wide-eyed wonder. Morrison's grandson had never seen a city, and Lucas took pride in showing him around, pointing out landmarks with the confidence of someone who'd found his place in the world. The morning of the testimony, Eleanor dressed carefully in a deep green gown that proclaimed both status and seriousness. Rowan helped her with the Duchess's jewels, his mother's sapphire ring, a pearl necklace, earrings that caught the light. You're ready, he said, kissing her gently. You're going to change the world today. I'm just going to present data. You're going to present evidence that human dignity and economic success aren't mutually exclusive. That's revolutionary, Eleanor. Own it. The parliamentary chamber was intimidating. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, rows of stern-faced men in formal dress. Eleanor entered with Rowan at her side and felt the weight of their stares. Some of those men had been at social events where she'd been dismissed and mocked. Some had laughed at Adrian's jokes about unsuitable women. Now they stood as she was announced, according her the respect due a Duchess testifying before Parliament. The chairman of the Labour Committee greeted her formally. Your Grace, thank you for making this journey. We're eager to hear about the innovations you've implemented at Ironcrest. Eleanor took her place at the testimony table and began. She spoke for 90 minutes, presenting clear data about how improved working conditions had increased productivity, how profit-sharing reduced theft and accidents, how adequate housing improved worker loyalty and reduced turnover. She shared specific numbers, costs versus benefits, mortality rates before and after safety improvements, productivity increases following worker education programs. She didn't speak emotionally or attempt to appeal to sentiment. She presented cold, hard evidence that treating workers with dignity was good business. The committee members asked sharp questions. Eleanor answered each one directly, often referencing specific data from her carefully organized notes. She watched their expressions shift from skepticism to interest to genuine engagement. When she finished, the chairman said, Your Grace, this is remarkably thorough work. You've provided exactly the kind of evidence-based analysis we need to support labor reform legislation. I'm glad it's useful, Eleanor said. More than useful, transformative. The chairman looked around at his colleagues. I believe we should invite Her Grace to serve as an advisor to this committee as we draft new labor standards. Her expertise would be invaluable. Eleanor blinked in surprise. You want me to help write the legislation? If you're willing. Your experience is unique. You've actually implemented these reforms and documented the results. We need that practical knowledge to create effective policy. Eleanor glanced at Rowan, who was watching from the gallery with undisguised pride. He nodded slightly. I would be honored, Eleanor said. The news spread through London with remarkable speed. The Duchess of Blackthorne, the woman society had once mocked, had just been invited to help shape national labor policy. The woman deemed too substantial, too intelligent, too much was now being consulted by Parliament on matters of national importance. That evening, Georgiana hosted a small celebration dinner. Several of Georgiana's friends attended, women Eleanor recognized from various social events, women who'd once looked through her as if she didn't exist. Now they looked at her with something approaching awe. You addressed Parliament, one woman said, her voice hushed. Actually stood before all those men and presented policy recommendations. I presented data, Eleanor corrected. They drew their own conclusions. But you gave them the evidence to do so. You proved that a woman could understand economics and labor management better than the men currently making policy. Another woman leaned forward. Your Grace, some of us have been meeting, discussing how to educate ourselves in areas traditionally closed to women. We wondered, would you be willing to speak with us? To share how you learned these skills? Eleanor looked around the table at these women, trapped in the same cage she'd once occupied, searching for the same escape she'd found. Yes, she said, I'd be happy to. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Eleanor divided her time between parliamentary committee meetings and informal gatherings with women eager to learn about economics, estate management, and wielding authority without apology. She discovered she had a gift for teaching, for making complex subjects accessible, for encouraging women to trust their own intelligence. Cecilia attended several of these gatherings, taking notes and asking sharp questions. She pulled Eleanor aside after one session. I talked to Edmund, told him I wanted real involvement in estate management. Cecilia's smile was radiant. He was surprised but open to it. He's been teaching me about the agricultural operations, letting me review accounts and make suggestions. Eleanor, I'm actually using my mind for something that matters. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of me too, for the first time in my life. Cecilia embraced her sister. Thank you for showing me this was possible. In June, as Eleanor and her family prepared to return to Ironcrest, a final surprise arrived. A letter from the Queen herself, requesting Eleanor's presence at a private audience. Eleanor attended alone, nervous despite everything she'd accomplished. Queen Adelaide received her in a private sitting room, less formal than a state audience, but no less impressive. Your Grace, the Queen said, gesturing for Eleanor to sit. I've been following your work with great interest. Your Majesty, you've accomplished something remarkable. Not just the labor reforms, though those are significant, but something more fundamental. The Queen studied Eleanor thoughtfully. You've challenged assumptions about what women are capable of. You've proven that intelligence and strength in a woman aren't flaws to be hidden, but assets to be celebrated. I simply did what needed doing, Your Majesty. Exactly. You saw problems and solved them without waiting for permission or approval. That's rare. The Queen paused. I'm appointing you to a permanent advisory position on labor and industrial policy. Your official title will be Parliamentary Consultant on Worker Welfare. It's unprecedented. No woman has held such a position before, but then you seem to specialize in the unprecedented. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept. Say you'll continue this important work. And say you'll keep showing other women that they can be more than decorative. I accept. Gratefully. The journey back to Ironcrest felt like returning home in the truest sense. As their carriage rolled through the familiar gates, as the fortress came into view against the summer sky, Eleanor felt profound peace. She had left London 6 months ago as a woman fleeing mockery and seeking escape. She was returning as someone who'd transformed a duchy, healed a traumatized child, helped shape national policy, and proven that strength came in forms society had failed to recognize. Lucas pressed against the carriage window, waving at Morrison and the staff assembled in the courtyard. "We're home," he said excitedly. "Papa, Eleanor, we're home." "Yes," Rowan said, his hand finding Eleanor's. "We are." The staff greeted them with genuine warmth. Even Mrs. Rothwell managed something approaching a smile. "Welcome back, Your Grace," the housekeeper said. "The household ran smoothly in your absence, but it lacked something without you here." "Thank you, Mrs. Rothwell. It's good to be back." That evening, Eleanor stood on the terrace overlooking the sea. Summer had gentled Ironcrest's harsh edges, but the fundamental character remained, wild, beautiful, unforgiving to the weak, but generous to the strong. Rowan joined her, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely." Eleanor leaned back against him. "I have everything I never knew I needed. A home that values strength over decorative compliance. Work that matters. A child who's healing, a husband I love and respect equally. Purpose beyond seeking approval. The woman everyone mocked is now shaping national policy. That woman never existed. I was always this person. London just couldn't see it." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "You saw it, though. From the beginning. You looked at a woman society dismissed and saw someone worth partnering with." "I saw someone too stubborn to break and too intelligent to waste." Rowan smiled. "I had no idea I was getting someone who would revolutionize everything she touched. We revolutionized it together." "No." His voice was firm. "You led. I followed, and I'm better for it." Lucas appeared on the terrace, Morrison's grandson beside him. "Eleanor, Papa! Morrison says there's a ship coming into the harbor. Can we go watch it dock?" "Of course," Eleanor said. "Let's all go." As they walked together through the fortress, their home, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd started as Lady Eleanor Whitford, dismissed and mocked for failing to meet shallow standards. She'd become the Duchess of Blackthorne through a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way, she'd become Eleanor, just Eleanor, fully herself without apology or diminishment. A woman who'd transformed isolation into community, practical arrangement into love, wounded child into confident boy, harsh fortress into warm home. She'd proven that strength came in many forms, that intelligence and substance weren't flaws but assets, that refusing to shrink made you powerful, not unworthy. She'd proven everyone who mocked her absolutely wrong. 5 years later, Eleanor stood in the same spot on the terrace, watching a very different scene. Lucas, now 12, was showing his younger brother, 2-year-old James, born 3 years after Eleanor and Rowan's marriage became a true partnership, how to identify different types of ships in the harbor. The boy was patient and kind, all traces of his traumatized past transformed into compassionate strength. In the courtyard below, a group of young women gathered around Morrison, learning about agricultural management. They'd come from across England to attend the Ironcrest Institute for Women's Education, Eleanor's latest project, a school teaching economics, estate management, and leadership to women denied such education elsewhere. The shipping company Rowan had built had expanded, now operating under strict labor standards that other companies were beginning to adopt. The parliamentary committee Eleanor advised had passed sweeping labor reforms, using Ironcrest as the model. Worker deaths had decreased nationally, conditions had improved. It was slow, imperfect progress, but progress nonetheless. Adrian Belmont had been released from debtor's prison after 2 years, his estate sold, his title diminished. Eleanor heard he'd moved to the countryside and lived quietly, his arrogance finally broken by consequences. She felt no satisfaction in his fall, only relief that his judgment no longer mattered. Cecilia visited regularly now, having transformed her own marriage into a genuine partnership and become an advocate for women's education in her own right. She and Eleanor had built a relationship they'd never had as girls, founded on mutual respect rather than competitive comparison. Georgiana had married, surprisingly, to Morrison's son, a shipping captain who valued her mind as much as her beauty. They lived half the year in London and half at Ironcrest, and Georgiana had become Eleanor's partner in running the Women's Institute. The fortress was no longer isolated and forbidding. It had become a center of innovation and education, a place where women came to learn that they could be more than decorative, where workers received fair treatment and training, where children like Lucas could heal and thrive. Rowan appeared beside Eleanor, James balanced on his hip. "The new students arrived this morning," he said. 30 of them this term. Morrison says they're all eager and terrified in equal measure. I remember that feeling, Eleanor smiled. We'll show them there's nothing to fear in using their minds. Mama! James reached for Eleanor and she took him, settling him against her hip. He had Rowan's gray eyes and Eleanor's dark hair, and his personality was pure mischief and affection. What do you see, my love? Eleanor asked, pointing toward the harbor. Ships! Big ships! That's right. Those ships carry goods all over the world. One day, you and Lucas might run that shipping company together. Or you might do something completely different, Rowan added. Whatever you choose, as long as you choose it for the right reasons. Lucas climbed the terrace steps, slightly breathless. Eleanor, there's a woman at the gates. She says she read about the Institute and traveled from Scotland to apply. Mrs. Rothwell wasn't sure if we're accepting additional students this term. I'll go meet her, Eleanor said, handing James back to Rowan. If she came all the way from Scotland, we'll find space for her. As she walked toward the gates, Eleanor reflected on how far she'd come from that ballroom where she'd overheard Adrian's mockery. That night had broken something in her, the desire to be accepted by people who would never value her. But it had also freed her to build something real. She'd found love that was partnership rather than performance. She'd found work that mattered. She'd found family that chose each other daily. She'd found purpose beyond seeking approval. The woman at the gates was young, perhaps 19, and looked exhausted from travel, but determined. Your Grace, she said, curtsying deeply. My name is Margaret Ross. I'm from a small village in the Highlands. I heard about your institute from a traveling merchant, and I saved for a year to make this journey. I know I don't have formal application or references, but I can read and write and calculate. And I'll work harder than anyone if you'll just give me a chance to learn. Eleanor saw herself in this girl, desperate for knowledge, willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to be more than the world expected. What do you want to study, Margaret? Everything. Economics, management, how to run an estate or business. I want to be useful, Your Grace. I want to matter. You already matter, Eleanor said gently. But I understand wanting to prove it. Come. We'll find you a room and get you enrolled. The term has just begun. You haven't missed anything essential. Margaret's face transformed with relief and joy. Thank you, Your Grace. Thank you. I won't disappoint you. You couldn't possibly disappoint me. You're here. You chose yourself. That's already everything. As Eleanor led Margaret into the fortress, she thought about all the women who would pass through these gates in years to come. Each one seeking the same thing Eleanor had found, permission to be fully themselves, tools to build meaningful lives, community that valued strength over decorative compliance. This was her legacy, not just the labor reforms or parliamentary position or transformed duchy. But this, showing other women that they could choose themselves, that being too much was actually being exactly enough, that refusing to shrink was the most powerful thing they could do. That night, Eleanor stood again on the terrace, Rowan beside her. Lucas was inside reading to James. The Institute students were settling into their rooms. The fortress hummed with life and purpose. Do you ever regret it? Rowan asked, leaving London, marrying a stranger, coming to this harsh place? Eleanor laughed. Not for a single moment. This harsh place made me possible. London would have crushed me eventually. Here, I could grow. You did more than grow. You flourished. You transformed everything you touched. We transformed it together. Eleanor leaned against him. That's what partnership means. Building something neither could create alone. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the North Sea. The woman everyone had mocked had become someone powerful and respected. But more importantly, she'd become someone who helped other mocked, dismissed, underestimated women find their own power. Eleanor had built a fortress, not just of stone, but of strength, compassion, and refusal to accept the world's shallow judgments. And in building it, she'd finally built herself. The woman society rejected had created a community that valued exactly what made her different, and that Eleanor knew as she watched the stars emerge over Ironcrest was the greatest victory of all, not proving them wrong through spite or revenge, but by building something so meaningful that their judgment became irrelevant. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, she'd shown countless others they could choose themselves too. That was worth more than all the approval society could ever offer. That was everything.